Now, to start our day positively, even though we have this bad weather, but it's all about appreciating the environment, right? So kahit na tayo ay naka-quarantine pa din, we are happy to share this very inspiring video of our beautiful planet, our beautiful environment, and it's all about that this morning. So appreciate that, and that can help us be closer to our Almighty God as well. So let's watch this short, inspiring video of the day. All right, so we hope that you were inspired by that short video of how beautiful our planet is, diba? In land, at the sea, and even in the sky. So we will learn more about our beautiful planet and how to take care of it today for this lifelong learning webinar. But before that, we would like to warmly welcome each and every one of you despite the cold weather. Let's now call in virtually the Chief of the Testa Women Center, our dear Center Chief, Ma'am Angelica Gonzalez. Ma'am Angie, good morning. Thank you.
Thank you. To our resource speaker from Climate Change Commission, Mr. Ludwig Federigan, and his companions, dear TESDA trainees, to the Juanas and Juans of TESDA Women's Center, to the TESDA Gender and Development Focal Point System from central, regional, and district offices, to our viewers joining us live from the official TESDA Facebook page and TWC's YouTube. Ladies and gentlemen, a rainy but pleasant morning to all of us. Welcome to the fourth and last session of TESDA Women's Center's Lifelong Learning Program webinar series. Nakompleto nyo ba ang ating 4 na sessions? May I see a thumbs up kung nakompleto ang 4 na sessions? Ayan, I'm seeing hands. Congratulations sa mga nakakompleto ng 4 na sessions. And thank you for staying. This morning's topic is another relevant and very informative session. It's called the Global Climate Change, What You Need to Know. So we'll be given so many information about global climate change. Even before the pandemic, due to COVID-19 struck the globe, we are already faced with a global concern. No? It's called the climate change, which affects the entire Earth systems. This include Earth's warming, rainfalls, that is what we are experiencing right now, as well as rising level of the sea levels. No? All of this affect our lives. And personally, I'm a bit worried about the next generation because with the things that we're experiencing right now, if you look forward, what would happen to our grandchildren and great-grandchildren? Ngayong umaga ay ipapaalaala o di kaya ay maradagdagan ang ating kaalaman tungkol sa climate change. At sana mula sa ating mga matututunan ay makibahagi tayo upang higit na mapangalagaan ang ating nag-iisang mundo kahit lamang sa ating maliliit na pamamaraan at kakayahan. Kapag pinagsama-sama, ito ay isang mainam ang maaaring idulot nito sa ating kinaharap na climate change. Again, thank you very much for completing our webinar series, and please stay safe and have a pleasant morning again.
Thank you very much also, Ma'am Angie, for that warm welcome, ma'am. And the team really appreciates your support and guidance for the 4 parts of our webinar series. Maraming salamat po. All right, and I would like to again share to everyone. I know ang ating mga kasama sa Zoom are all familiar with the team po mula sa TESDA Women's Center, but again, this is the team bringing you this webinar series. We are the TESDA Women's Center Research, Advocacy, Systems Development, Gender and Development Unit, headed by Ma'am Maylene Sumera, our supervisor and the unit head. From the left po, we have Sir Alice Glenn Montesinos, our senior TSC specialist and our host for this Zoom webinar. We also have Ma'am Melina Faith de Inla, na nasa Las Piñas. Ma'am, thank you for your support, our TSC2 specialist po, and she is our co-host, monitoring the comments from the TESDA's official FB page. And yours truly, I'm part of this unit po, and we also have Ms. Hannah Zita Luis de la Cruz, TSC Specialist 2, who will be documenting this program and also monitoring your participation po all throughout the session. And of course, we have our partners from the Climate Change Commission and his team supporting us for this program. Kaya maraming salamat po sa lahat ng sumusuporta. So as mentioned by Ma'am Angie, this is the final part of our LLLP, or the Lifelong Learning Program kung tawagin namin. And thank you for being part of this the whole month of July. So of course, we're all excited to hear more about this topic from our friends and partners from the Climate Change Commission. But we would like to inform all those connected po sa atin, lalo na sa general public. This is especially for our trainees in the Women's Center. We have here bartending, bread and pastry production, barista. We have EPAS, Electronic Products Assembly and Servicing, Electrical Installation and Maintenance. We have FELS, Facilitate e-learning sessions. We have Food Processing, Food and Beverage Services, Shielded Metal Arc Welding, Plumbing as well, and Driving. NC2, these are our trainees, and even our graduates are connected for this lifelong learning webinar series. And everyone, maraming salamat po sa pag-connect ngayon. All right, so our program will run from 9 a.m. until 12 noon. That's our target time. So this is divided into 3 parts, as you can see in my visual aid. Part 1 would be context setting. So let's prepare our mind and our hearts sa ating pag-uusapan and answer some basic questions. Ano ang significance ng topic na ito, as mentioned by Ma'am Angie? Baka may ilang katanungan pa kayo when you were registering for this program. So unti-unti nating makapagbibigay ng clear background para dyan. And next, we will also talk first about the duties and responsibilities of TESDA sa ating pong ahensya when it comes to greening Tibet. So ano ang significance nito para sa ating ahensya sa TESDA, also the TESDA Women's Center. And lastly, bago magtuloy-tuloy sa programa, let's first understand ano ang climate change and global warming, so that tuloy-tuloy na magbibigay ng karagdagang information na ating speaker sa kanyang topic for the part 2. So the Climate Change Commission will then present the global climate change, what you need to know. And the third part would be the open forum and the program evaluation. So stay tuned po para sa ating programa. Let's start with the first part, and I have the opportunity to share briefly and present for this context setting. In just about 30 minutes, let's talk about ang konteksto or background ng ating pag-uusapang programa. So we will now start with the context setting. Okay, so para kayo muna ang aming malaman ng understanding, makapag-share kayo ng inyong thought bago kami magtuloy-tuloy na mag-share ng information. Kindly share your thoughts, speak your mind. Our participants po sa Zoom and also those connected sa ating Facebook pages. Here's my first question. Kindly share and submit your answer po sa Zoom chat box at saka sa comment section ng ating FB page. Alright? Yan. First question ko para sa inyo. What is your favorite weather? Ano ang paborito mong lagay ng panahon? Yan. As you can see in the picture, mahilig ka ba sa medyo mainit na panahon, kagaya ng nasa kaliwang larawan, o maulan na panahon? Yan. O di kaya medyo makulimlim na may kulog-kulog, na parang ngayon, medyo dark yung ng skies natin. Or sa iba naman na nakapag-travel abroad noon, di ba? Mahilig ka ba sa talagang malamig na klima with snow, kagaya niyan? What is your favorite weather or lagay ng panahon? Yan. Sa inyo po yan your favorite kind of weather. Pili po kayo, mainit-init, maulan, makulimlim ng konti na may kulog, o di kaya ay malamig talaga, sa iba pa nga ay may snow. Ayan, lalo na sa naka-experience po yan. I am excited to see your answers, participants. So let me just stop sharing. Tapusin lang ko inyong sagot. May nagsabing snow. May iba naman ay windy, rainy. May iba ang kakilala mahilig sa maulan. Parang nakaka-emote na klase. Summer. Iba naman yan. Thank you, nakikita ko yung iba na nagsishare ng kanilang sagot po dito sa Fels, our trainer, dressmaking, barista, Epas. Thank you. Talagang tuwan-tuwa sa summer, yung iba. Yan, nakakatuwa naman. Thank you for sharing that. May windy. Sa iba, summer. Sa iba naman ay rainy or fair weather. Sa iba, yung katamtaman lang. Ayan. So may iba pala na gustong-gusto ang rainy season. Yung kagaya ngayon na nag-uulan talaga, di ba? Mamaya pag-uusapan natin yan, yung ating kalagayan sa ngayon. So I can see some of the answers are still coming in sa ating Zoom chat box. We like that. Gusto-gusto namin na kayo ay nagpa-participate. Salamat po sa participants natin sa Fels. Yan. So mostly, mostly summer, fair weather, katamtaman lang, rainy. May nagsasabi talaga nag-i-enjoy sila sa maulan. Basta nakabota. At may payong din po tayo. Ayan. Thank you. Nakakatuwa, ang pagkakasari-sari ng tao. We have reasons bakit tayo nag-i-enjoy sa particular weather or lagay ng panahon. And I think napag-usapan niyo yan sa first part of our webinar, right? About diversity ng tao, about gender sensitivity ng tao, yung hilig niya at kagustuhan. So very good. Thank you, thank you. Now, let me go back to my screen and let's talk more about weather. Yan. Marami ang iba't iba, ang klase ng kine-enjoy. Pero sa totoo lang, paglagay ng panahon ng pag-uusapan, minsan, mapanganib din ito, right? Minsan, kapag extreme ito na pagbabago, meron din itong masamang epekto sa lahat. Pwede sa kabuhayan, o pwede namang sa buhay ng tao or sa kalusugan, right? So, although we enjoy some types of weather or lagay ng panahon, pero pag-usapan naman natin ngayon kapag merong extreme changes. At yan ang pinakang core ng ating pag-uusapan din mamaya with our speaker. Balikan lang natin ulit ng ating mga nababalitaan, naririnig sa radyo, kapag apektado tayo ng extreme changes in the weather. Yan. I think we're all familiar pag sinabi nating drought or tagtuyot, right? Yan. So, anong makikita natin dito? Sa sobrang init ng panahon, nakikita natin, this is from coursera.org na picture, apektado ang palayan, ang kabuhayan, ang taniman. And according to this information, to this research, severe drought ang naranasan talaga sa Asia, Indian subcontinent to Vietnam, worst drought naman sa Africa, Ethiopia, Morocco, Canada, US, Brazil, and Colombia. Ano ibig sabihin po nito? Iba't ibang continents po yan. We are seeing napakaraming apektado ng matinding pagbabago, extreme changes sa pagdating sa lagay ng panahon. Kumusta ang Philippines? Yan, tayo ba ay affected din ito? Affected ba tayo sa sinasabing talagang masamang pagbabago ng panahon? Yan. As you can see here, a dated March 2019 mula sa Pag-asa, Philippine Atmospheric, Geophysical, and Astronomical Services Administration. 2019 na, before the pandemic. Sabi nila, inaasahan, tuloy-tuloy na tagtuyot sa 22 provinces po ito dahil sa El Nino. Yan, nagtatagal talaga na init, no? Hindi normal na init na ating naranasan. Usually, more than 3 months yan. Sa Ilocos Norte, Zamboanga del Sur, Zamboanga Sibugay, Maguindanao at Cebu. Is the effect the same? Kagaya nung nakita natin kanina from the international data? May problema din ba, magkakaproblema din ba tayo pagdating sa kabuhayan, sa pagkain ng ating mga mamamayan, lalo na't magsasaka? Sa mga may hirap talaga na parte ng ating society, right? Damayan sa Pilipinas, as you can see sa yearly reports na ating pong natatanggap tungkol dyan. So, sa iba na nag-enjoy sa mainit, sa summer na panahon, kapag ito ay matindi naman, ang pagbabago, then meron tayong tagtuyot or drought. At dito, talagang meron itong negative effects din, no? Para sa kalikasan, para sa atin din naman na mamamayan. Pero, ang nakapagtataka, may mga lugar nga na sobrang may init. Pero, meron ding mga lugar na ang lalamig at ang lalakas ng ulan. Heavy rains, malakas na pag-ulan ito. And I think you're all familiar din naman habang naranasan natin ito ngayon, no? Dahil lang sa pinapalakas na habagat. But let's look at some of the examples na nangyayari talaga sa ating planet. Based from NBCnews.com, June 2019, nagkaroon sila ng analysis. As you can see in the picture, sa Missouri ito, isang state sa US, farm po ito. Pero kayang palubugin, kayang bigla na lang mawala ang isang farm dahil sa sobrang lakas ng pag-ulan. So hindi na siya nakakatulong, no, sa kanyang kabuhayan o sa kanyang negosyo. Talagang malaki itong epekto sa kanya. So when they analyze this, about more than 8,700 weather stations around the world, taong 1964 hanggang 2013, sinasabi na more than 8.5% downpours o malakas na pag-ulan ang naranasan talaga kaysa sa ina-expect, lalo na sa taong 2014, 2013, sa North America, Europe, and Asia. Yan. Nakita niyo po ito, iba't ibang kontinente ulit. The information is saying na nangyayari ito around the globe, around the world. So is it true sa Philippines? Kung tayo ang tatanungin, tayo na mukhang dinaanan ng maraming malalakas na bagyo, di ba? Well, from Pag-asa, December 28, 2020, last year lang po ito, during that pandemic din po. Mula 1951 hanggang 2020, ang taong 2020 ang isa sa naiulat na may pinakamalalakas na pag-ulan sa Pilipinas, according to Pag-asa. Yun, nakikita nila, no? Talagang above the normal rain, yung or rainfall or downpour ang naranasan natin, lalo na nung taong 2020 from the Philippine Weather System Pacific Storm Update ito. Yan. Bakit? Ano po nangyari noong 2020, right? Last year lang po yan. You can see here the picture from the Philippines Humanitarian Country Team sa gawing kaliwa. Super Typhoon Goni or Rolly, kung naalala pa natin ito na ating naranasan ng ating mga kababayan din po, no? Lalo na sa bandang Bicol. Yan. And yan, nakita din natin sa gawing kanan yung Typhoon Ulysses naman. Yan. At alam natin talagang hardly hit ang Bicol, ang Tuguegarao, and the large part of Luzon. Makikita nyo rito yung nangyari sa Marikina. Through rubber boats, sila ay nirescue na rin. So totoong-totoo na kapag sinabi nating the world is experiencing heavy rains, sa Philippines, damang-dama din natin yan talaga. At hindi lang ito basta pangalan ng bagyo or basta taon na tayo ay na-hit nito. We are talking about thousands of lives na naapektuhan nito. Kabuhayan, infrastructure, agriculture, kalusugan, right? Kasi mas prone sa sakit eh. Ang mga bata, ito man ay dengue, leptospirosis, malaria, ito yung narinig natin eh, na mas rampant kapag na-hit tayo ng ganitong klaseng disaster. So this is really happening, and today we have our speaker to talk about what is causing these extreme changes in weather at bakit tayo dapat maalarma at ano ang dapat nating gawin para dito. And not to mention, di ba, the lives that are lost pagdating sa talagang malalakas na klase ng mga disasters na ito. Very recent lang ito, last week and then this week po ito. Pinalalakas na yung habagat because of the Typhoon Fabian at saka yung isa pa, di ba, na nagpapalakas ng habagat nito. Nakikita natin sa left side, bandang Espanya yan, Manila, na talagang lumulubog pagdating sa malakas na pagulan, and the Manila Bay. Ang epekto nito ay pagbalik ulit ng mga basura and may effect ulit ito sa kalusugan at sa environment natin. So talagang very much affected tayo sa extreme changes of weather. And I'm sure that most of you are familiar sa mga balitang ito. What we really want to share is that mula to sa philstar.com, just an additional information. Alam niyo ba, ating Pilipinas ay dinaanan ng 3 pinakamalalakas na tropical cyclones or typhoons at first landfall. Sa unang paglandfall nito, pumasok sila sa Pilipinas. Ito yung top 10. Yan, from this source. Nandiyan ang Super Typhoon Goni, yung Rolly, Super Typhoon Haiyan, Yolanda, right, sa Visayas, sa Samar and Leyte at sa iba pang kalapit na lugar nito. Super Typhoon Meranti, Itbayat, Philippines naman ang tinamaan nito. Pero as you can see here, bagamat meron sa ibang lugar, sa Taiwan, sa Fiji, sa Australia, nandun ulit ang Pilipinas. Number 8 and 9, Super Typhoon Meggy, Super Typhoon Zeb, international name niya yan eh. So, ano ang gusto nating sabihin? Victim ba talaga ang Philippines? Ano ang causes ng mga ito, di ba? Na pag-uusapan din natin later. But we want to really say na all of us are affected. Lalo na kung kayo ay may kamag-anak sa mga lugar na madalas daanan talaga ng mga bagyong ito. Extreme changes talaga ito ng ating weather. So, at nakakalungkot na, di ba, muli nating naalala yung mga balita kung ilang libong buhay ang nasasawi every time na meron ganito. There was a question actually sa column na ito ng Philstar. We've been hit 3 times by the most powerful typhoons, di ba? Is the Philippines ready na? Handa na ba siya ulit sa mga ito na dapat sana ay natuto na, naging handa na, at mas alam na ng mga tao kung paano mas higit na pangalagaan ang planetang ito, ang sarili nating community or society, right? That was a good question. Or kailangan pa ba talagang makaranas pa tayo ng isa pa na hindi tayo ganun kahanda at wala tayong, ginagawa to mitigate or to lessen its effects. So, ito yung reality na ating pag-uusapan for this. But I want to share this as the core message natin from the WEDGE, Women's Empowerment, Development, and Gender Equality Plan. Lalo na napag-usapan natin sa first webinar, ang diverse group of people. According dito, ang climate change, which we're going to talk again, and the risks from natural disasters, nag-amplify nito ang kahirapan at ang pagkasira din naman ng environment. At sino ang mas apektado? Nandiyan ng mga kababaihan as part of the marginalized sector. Ang kalalakihan, lalo na sila ang pangunahing naghahanap buhay sa agriculture man yan, sa fisheries man yan, di ba? O sa pagsasaka man yan. Children of poor and marginalized households and communities na nakadepende lang sa natural resources natin. Idagdag pa natin na pag-usapan natin dati, no? How about the elderlies, those with disabilities, na pag-usapan natin sa first part, na at risk talaga at kailangan ng assistance kapag merong ganitong disasters or even kapag wala rin naman tayo. Yan. So, we've talked about the context, right? The background, kung bakit napaka-importante ng webinar na ito for our trainees and for our employees and for everyone connected. Because we are affected by the weather at lalo na yung extreme changes nito. Kabuhayan, kalusugan, buhay, no, ang ating pinag-uusapan. So let me go now to the second part of our context setting. Ano naman ang duties and responsibilities of TESDA in greening Tibet? Yan. So bakit tayo nagkaroon ng ganitong programa? At dati pa naman natin itong na-implement, pero bakit natin gustong i-sustain ang ganitong programa? And what's about greening Tibet? Ayan. So, bago ulit ako magtuloy, I just wanna check kung okay pa ang inyong energy level. Here's my second question po. My second question is, are human activities impacting the climate system? Tanong ko lang po sa inyo, ang mga tao ba, tayo ba, ang ating bang ginagawa ay nakaka-apekto sa extreme changes ng weather, sa sistema ng climate ng ating bansa? Kagaya nung nakaraan, please answer yes kung ito nakaka-apekto, no kung hindi ito nakaka-apekto, maybe 50-50. Halimbawa, kindly share your answer in our Zoom chat box and in our Facebook page din po. We would love to read your comments, your answers. Are human activities impacting the climate system ng Pilipinas at ng mundong ito? And mukhang napakaraming yes ang nakita ko Thank you from Fels, from Just Making, Barista. Thank you everyone. Housekeeping as well. Our trainers are answering as well. Basura, pagsusunog. Ayan, nagme-mention na yung isa nating participant, si Ms. Michelle. Thank you for sharing that. Yan, food processing also ay nag-share ng kanilang sagot. Yan. I'm checking all the qualifications who are participating po. So thank you very much sa inyong pagsuporta. I'll be happy to see, and EPAS as well, I'll be happy to see answers mula sa Facebook page din po natin if our co-host can share din po. Yan, lalo na para makita natin yung kanilang mga kasagutan. Yan. Thank you very much. All right. So, dahil dyan, sagutin na natin yung tanong na yan at pag-usapan ng ating duties and responsibilities. Yan. From NASA.gov, binanggit doon that in their 5th assessment report, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, a group of 1,300 independent scientific experts. Diba NASA, ito yung nakatingin talaga sa kalagayan ng kalawakan din natin, diba? So sabi nila, more than 95% probability that human activities over the past 50 years have warmed our planet. Yan ang sagot po ng NASA. So sa mga sumagot ng yes, wala naman ako nakitang no kanina. Ayan. Maraming salamat po for seeing na talagang ang laki ng ginagawa ng tao para sana alagaan yung ating kalikasan. Pero ang totoo, diba, nakaka-contribute ito sa global warming, sa pag-init ng ating planeta. Okay. So more of that will be shared by our speaker din maya-maya. Alam ko baka may naglalaro na sa inyong isipan, bakit nga ba? Anong ginagawa ng tao? Diba? How can we prevent this? So later, we will talk more about that. So about the duties and responsibilities of TESDA. All right. Ilang mandates and policies lang po ang ating pag-uusapan at masaya kaming ma-inform kayo kung bakit very important ito for TESDA and for TESDA Women Center. Of course, we have the 2016 law, RA 10771, Philippine Green Jobs Act. Yan. So itong batas na ito, signed by our President, in the time ito ni President Aquino, sinasabi dito na dapat ito yung batas na nais magprotekta ng ating environment, right, sa Philippines. At dapat kasama rito ang pag-create ng green jobs. Sustaining the environment dapat, ang employment ng isa, ang trabaho ng isa, and skills din niya. And even giving incentives sa mga companies or industries na nagbibigay ng ganitong green jobs and are also helping us conserve our environment and natural resources. So meron tayong ganyang batas po. We also have the Philippine Development Plan 2017 to 2022, panahon ng ating Pangulo. So nakalagay din dito, the Philippines will support the promotion of green jobs in the country. So lagi na itong naririnig about green economy, green jobs. So ano ibig sabihin nito for Tibet? Let's talk very quick about greening Tibet. Pag sinabi natin greening, lalo na sa iba na favorite ang color green, di ba? Very peaceful siya. Mula sa Cambridge Dictionary, ito yung proseso of becoming more active about protecting the environment. So pag meron kang green hands, green thumb, di ba? Mas mahilig ka na mas alagaan yung mga halaman, yung kapaligiran. So with that, nakuha yung concept ng greening Tibet. Pero for TESDA, since tayo ay technical vocational education, right, and training, for us, it means improving the understanding and implementation of education for sustainable development. Sustainable development sa parte ng education like this lifelong learning program. And we hope that through Greening Tibet, we will contribute in transforming learning, our training, right, environment, and even the capacities of our trainers and educators para ma-implement natin talaga ito. Education for Sustainable Development. That's from the univoc.unesco.org. So it all starts with giving the accurate information. That's why we're here for our webinar. So ito yung mga ilang paraan na gagawin po: greening the campus, greening the curriculum and training, greening research, greening the community and workplace, greening institutional culture. So bago ang lahat ng ito, we need to really inform our stakeholders and everyone kung bakit ito very important talaga. Okay. And lastly, we had the opportunity to be part of the massive open online course by Coursera. Online po ito ng University of Pennsylvania. So we were also shared with information or knowledge about the global warming and climate change. And we want to share it to everyone, lalo na po sa TESDA natin. Yan. So those are the two parts of our context setting, di ba? Napag-usapan natin bakit ito mahalaga para sa iyo, para sa atin na pag-usapan ito, at ano ang duties and responsibilities of TESDA in greening the vet. Now, but before we formally start with the session from our speaker, baka nais nating linawin and to understand climate change and global warming. Yan naman na ating pag-usapan ngayon. All right, here is my question number 3. I hope that you will share again your answers. Wala pong maling sagot, just share again your answers po sa Zoom at saka naka-tie in po sa Facebook page natin. Easy lang naman to. Is climate change different from global warming? Yan. Parang nung ano lang, no? Nung last week lang, no? Nagtanong tayo, magkaiba ba ang sexual and reproductive health rights? Maraming sumagot ng oo, ng maybe. But this time, share your answer. Is climate change different from global warming? You can say yes kung magkaiba. No kung hindi sila magkaiba, kung pareho lang. Maybe kung parang 50-50. Let me stop sharing lang po. And again, I would appreciate those answers coming in. And I would love to read your answers po para sa inyo. Is global warming different from climate change? Tingnan natin po ito. From Barista, yes. There's making yes. So para sa kanila, different, right? Yan. May isa tayong participant, same lang. Same lang siya. Yan ang sagot niya. Marami nagsasabing yes, magkaiba daw po ito. Sa SMAU NC2, nagsabi na no. Yan. Thank you ha. Free kayong magsabi ng inyong sagot. Batay sa inyong naririnig, na maabalitaan, napapanood. Is climate change different from global warming? Kung magkaiba sila, type in yes. Kung hindi sila magkaiba, no. Kung medyo 50-50, maybe. Ayan, yun yung sagot. So may nagsasabi ng no from Barista, may nagsasabi naman ng yes sa iba nating qualifications. At may kompleto pa ha. Sabi niya, climate change brought up ng global warming. Oh, gusto ko yan. Thank you, thank you. Well, papalawakin pa natin yung discussion po para dyan, but I'm happy to see na familiar kayo, di ba? Naririnig natin itong mga concepts na to. Pero definitely from our resource speaker, mas ma-appreciate pa natin yung lesson natin for this morning then. Okay? So thank you for sharing that. Thank you also sa mga connected din po via Facebook pages natin. Thank you very much. Later, we'll check your comments as well. Yan. So, pasagutin na po natin. Sasagutin na po natin ang tanong na yan. Pero, sagutin muna natin yung terms na dapat klaro sa atin. Sagutin muna natin kung magkaiba ang salitang weather o lagay ng panahon at saka climate or klima. Kasi baka nai-use mo to interchangeably, di ba? So these are the basic terms na dapat alam na natin so that we're prepared para sa session with the Climate Change Commission. Nakikita niyo po sa ating visual aid. Ang weather ay nagsasabing tells you what to wear each day, di ba? Masasabi mo ngayon, ano ang lagay ng panahon sa Taguig City? Makulimlim, kanina maulan. So dahil dyan, nakikita niyo sa picture, dapat may dala akong umbrella, right? Kasi ito yung weather ngayon. Short term siya eh. Dapat meron akong scarf, meron akong sweater, meron akong bota kung bahain ng lugar, halimbawa. Kasi yan ang lagay ng panahon ngayon. That's weather. Pag climate naman or klima, it tells you what types of clothes to have in your closet. So medyo pang matagalan na, no? Ito kasi yung na-expect kong klima eh, pag ganitong buwan eh. So dapat meron ako makapal na damit, o kapag summer dapat meron ako manipis na damit, 'di ba? Isa, o dapat meron akong ganito ng mga ganitong bagay bilang paghahanda sa ina-expect na klima natin. So magkaiba siya, no? Ang weather o lagay ng panahon, weather lang, at ang klima natin na pangmatagalan naman ito, no? Na ating pinag-uusapan. So, from climate.nasa.gov, ang sabi niya, weather refers to more local changes locally, di ba, sa iyong lokasyon. in the climate we see around us, short time scales ito. Mula minuto, oras, mga araw hanggang mga linggo. Yan siya. Pag climate naman, longer term averages naman ito. Pwedeng global. That's why we have here the topic about global climate change at saka regional. Yan. Pwede rin itong several seasons, years, or decades. So dapat malinaw yan, di ba? Ano ang lagay ng panahon, ano naman ang klima. Kaya nga, climate is what you expect, right? Rainy season ganito, dry season ganito, pero weather is what you get today, right? And that minutes or oras or days or weeks pa nga. Yan. So ano naman yung climate change versus global warming? Here's a definition from climate.nasa.gov. Global warming refers to the long-term warming of the planet. Long-term warming. But climate change, sumasaklaw ito sa global warming. Tama yung sagot ng ating participant kanina. Pero pag ginamit mo ang climate change, bukod sa tinatakal mo ng global warming, pinag-uusapan mo dito ang broader range of changes and its effects that are happening to our planet. Yan. Including pagtaas ng level ng katubigan natin, pag-shrink ng mga mountain glaciers na ating pag-uusapan mamaya, accelerating ice melt sa mga lugar na dapat mayelo pero nagkakaroon ng melting, Greenland, Antarctica, Arctic, at saka pag-shift kung kailan mag-bloom ang mga halaman, di ba? Ang mga bulaklak. So, global warming, long-term warming of the planet, the Earth is getting warmer, as we say it, pero climate change, sumasaklaw siya nito at pinag-uusapan natin ang range ng epekto nito sa ating planeta. At totoong-totoo po ito. Yan. So, the answer is, strictly, they refer to slightly different things. Ang global warming at saka climate change. At totoong-totoo po ito. This is our last picture for our context setting. Yan, from Coursera.org. Yan. Nakikita niyo po dito ang picture ng ating globo. According to this data, February 2019 data, ang mga nakakulay red yan, dito ay higher than normal temperatures. Is it spread across the globe, the planet? Yes. Higher than normal temperatures po ito. That's why we're saying nilalagnat ang lupa. The Earth is getting warmer, right? At nakikita natin ito sa buong planeta. At meron itong epekto sa buong mundo. That's why our topic is global climate change. At pag-uusapan po natin yan with our speaker. All right? So with that, we hope that you're all prepared for this session. Sana po nakapaghanda ang inyong isipan at puso sa maikling context setting na yon of the importance of this webinar. It is important for us from the Women's Center from TESDA, and we hope na sa inyo rin na nakakonect will be very important, and we can all, better take care of our environment involved. Okay. So with that, we will now move on to the second part of our program to discuss about global climate change. What you need to know. Yan. Allow me to give a brief introduction po ng ating speaker. Our speaker is a graduate of Bachelor of Science in Engineering at Don Bosco Technical College, Philippines, as top 5 of the graduating class po. He completed his master's in Business Administration at the University of San Carlos, Philippines, topping the USC Graduate School Comprehensive Examinations. He finished also his Strategic Business Economics program, graduating with merit at the University of Asia and the Pacific, Philippines. He completed his diploma in Supply Chain Management under the Business and Training Linkage program at the PUM Entrepreneurs for Entrepreneurs. Yan. The Hague, Netherlands. Our speaker is a climate reality leader and twice mentor. He is the executive director of the Young Environmental Forum and a non-resident fellow of Strat-based ADR Institute and one of the country's respected think tanks. Ayan. But most importantly, our speaker, he is the head of the Information and Knowledge Management Division of the Philippines Climate Change Commission. And thank you also to our speaker for writing the paper on the interconnectedness of health, climate change, and society during the peak of the COVID-19 pandemic. It is our privilege and our pleasure to have with us the team from the Climate Change Commission. Let's all welcome, give a virtual applause to our speaker, Sir Ludwig O. Federigan. Sir Ludwig, good morning, sir.
Good morning, Jonah. Is my audio clear?
Yes, sir. Yes. Thank you.
Yeah, okay. Good morning once again, Jonah. Good morning, everyone. Isang makakalikasang umaga sa ating lahat, no? Even if we are experiencing a rainy day today, no? But even if it is raining, it's a good day, no? For everyone. At kung nasan man kayong sulok ng Pilipinas, I hope everything is fine. Even at this period of the pandemic, at alam natin there is a growing threat of Delta coming in. I hope that you remain to be vigilant of this health emergency. No? So of course to our friends in TESDA led by Dr. Angelica Gonzalez, isang magandang umaga po sa inyong lahat at ang Climate Change Commission ay nagpapasalamat sa imbitasyon na iginawad ninyo para po dito sa ating lifelong learning session. No? At pwede na po natin sabihin na talaga ang usapin tungkol sa climate change or climate crisis or climate emergency ay talagang natataon na because this is not something that we still have to wait next year or perhaps a few years from now because the evidence is already present at this very moment. No? So I appreciate actually the context given by Jonah. No, I really appreciate that, especially in providing that differences of the meanings of the terms. No, like for example, I just wanted to zero in on the meaning of the weather and climate. No, I mean at least in a more layman's term. Alam niyo naman yung climate change is a little bit technical. In a more layman's term, siyempre yung weather, kung nasaan man po kayo ngayon, pag lumabas po kayo dyan sa lugar nyo, kung saan po kayo nakaupo, that is the weather that you will see. No? This is what you see is what you get. No? Actually right now, it's raining. No? And dun sa binigay na definition ni Jonah, when we talk of climate, take note, just the climate, the definition of climate, is the average weather, no, over a period of time, no? And they say, based on science, this average weather would be at least 25 to 30 years, no. So time is very important, no, in this particular definition, because one generation is actually more or less 25 years, no. So if you're going to study the time, the particular influence of climate in our weather system right now in the year 2021 may have been influenced by people who lived 25 years ago or 30 years ago. No? Kanina rin sinabi that human activities is influencing the climate. So it is very true. So all the human activities has been conducted 25 years ago have influenced the climate that we are experiencing right now. So, but that was 25 years ago. If you look at present, you would also realize that humanity have progressed for the past 20 years to present. No? So we produce more, no? And there are more people on this planet. No? So you expect that in the coming years, no, perhaps 25 years from now, if we don't mitigate and adapt to this changing climate, we would experience more catastrophic events, no? More extreme events. No? So when we talk of extreme, we're talking of this is beyond normal, no? beyond normal. No? Kasi because an event, a natural event is normal, it's normal. But an extreme event is beyond. It's a beyond normal event. Okay, so in this particular presentation, actually Jonah already touched on the greening Tibet. So I already shared with my team to slice the presentation and to exclude that in the conversation, no? So para at least mas shorter yung ating yung time slot ko at saka yung talking slot, no? This my difficulty, when I started talking and I become very talkative, I may be able to consume all the time, and I have to discipline myself on that, no? So once again, ako'y bumabati na magandang umaga sa ating lahat, at sabi ko nga kanina, natataon po ang pag-uusap natin tungkol sa climate change, no? As our country is currently in a state of a public health emergency because of the COVID-19 pandemic, we continue to work together towards putting an end to this particular challenge. We cannot afford to lose sight of climate change, no? As it is the most disastrous and most lingering crisis the world has ever made, no? Take note, kahit po merong COVID, hindi naman po magbabakasyon si climate change, no? Kasi hindi po part yun ng plano, no, na kailangan magbakasyon si COVID at si climate change kasi nandyan po si COVID. Sabay po silang shocks that we have to contend with, and these are challenges, no, that we have to face on a personal level, on a community level, and of course on a national level. None of us would have ever thought that COVID that we are facing right now will happen at this moment in the year 2020, because the last global pandemic happened was way back in 1918, which is the Spanish flu, and that was 102 years ago. So the time was very long. It's 1 century. So experiencing COVID tells us that there are a lot of very good stories, good and bad, that we can share to the next generation, the experiences that we had as of this moment. So this presentation actually are broken down. We would touch on the science of the climate change. We would explain at least technical jargons on climate. Then that is on the global scale. Then we would go to the impacts of climate change, at least on the Philippine context. No, we would go into the impacts of climate change on the Philippine context, and I wanted to share with you on the last part would be policies that is being undertaken by government to address the climate issue, at least as far as the Climate Change Commission is concerned. Climate Change Commission being the lead policy-making body of the government on all climate change related programs, projects, and activities. So let us go to the first part, which is the science of climate change. So let us put a definition. What is exactly climate change? So let us examine this definition. This is a quite technical definition of the climate change. This was taken from the Intergovernmental Panel of Climate Change. It's a group of scientists that was set up by the World Meteorological Organization way back in 1988, and they gave this definition for climate change. It is a change in the state of the climate that can be identified by changes in the mean. Mean ibig sabihin average, and variability of properties that persist for an extended period, either typically decades. When we talk of decades, or we're talking of 10 years. Climate change may be due, take note, may be due from natural internal processes or external forcings, or to persistent anthropogenic changes in the composition of the atmosphere. So what are the key terms here? Climate change is actually a natural phenomenon. At first, it's a natural phenomenon, meaning humanity has been living in the period of climate change ever since. Take note of that. It has been there ever since. The natural side of climate change is there. Take note. But the period right now, there's another definition that I will share with you later on, which was defined by UNFCCC, or United Nations Framework Convention on climate change. By the way, do we have that slide, Hans, on that definition of the UNFCCC? that is a change of climate which is attributed. Can we move to that slide, Hans? Yeah, this is a definition that was given by the UNFCCC way back in that was in 1992 during the Earth Summit. A change of climate which is attributed directly or indirectly to human activity that alters the composition of the global atmosphere. So in the first definition of IPCC, they say climate change can be attributed to a natural causes, which is a natural phenomenon, or to human activity. The presence of ore was I wanted to cite that one, the presence of ore, because technically climate change is a natural phenomenon over the years. But of course, when humans continue to influence the system by producing more carbon dioxide, we enter now a period, what we call a geological period of what we call Anthropocene, which is the root word, and this is where the word anthropogenica comes in, which means that the humans have already influencing the entire planetary boundaries of this planet. So everything that is happening to us, including weather events, there's always an imprint of the human activity, and therefore there is an influence of the climate change. So it remains to be both a natural phenomenon, but also a anthropogenic, meaning human influenced event. So for Philippines, for example, we are experiencing typhoons, and for a long period of time, even when I was young, when I was studying elementary or high school, this particular weather that we have of raining for the past few days has been there already. Hindi naman yan nawala. Based on forecast of Pagkasa, we receive an average of 20 typhoons a year, but around 65% of these would make a landfall in the Philippines, so around 13 or so typhoons in a year. So the typhoon is a natural event. Okay, take note of the term I'm using. It's a natural event. I do not want to pertain to it as a natural disaster, because those people who are working on the field of climate, when we try to communicate events, we not want to term it a disaster, because there is a qualifying standard how a disaster happens. Okay, and so this is a natural event. So how does climate influence a natural event? Okay, it requires science. It requires the study of science or science to ascertain whether such particular event is the human influence or it's a climate influenced event. So, which means that, for example, when we talk of the Typhoon Yolanda that happened in Leyte way back in 2013, I was still living in Cebu at the time in 2013. It was only in that particular typhoon that the term storm surge became very popular, but people were not aware of the word storm surge. So perhaps one of the causes why a lot of people died during that particular typhoon, because not familiarity of the term storm surge. This is sea level rising, but there is an increment rise that caused, which is actually the storm surge. So looking at it and saying that Yolanda an extreme event, yes, it is an extreme event, but in the eyes of science, there has to be a particular scientific study to ascertain that such event is actually considered. So you'll be able to see that for any event to be considered an extreme event, there has to be attribution on this. There has to be attribution, and to see what is really the imprint of the climate change on a particular event. So when I talk of imprint, up to what percentage that climate change influenced that particular event happening. No? I mean, we expect that event to happen, but to make it more stronger and more intense, whether climate change play on that particular event requires a science to tell us. No? Similar when Typhoon Ondoy happened in Manila way back in 2009, continuous rain over a period of 1 week, if I'm not mistaken, you'll be able to see that Pag-asa would sell that the amount of rainfall that Typhoon Ondoy dropped during the time was more than the average amount of rainfall over a period of a month. No, so that in itself, no, an indication that it is a human influenced weather event. So how does an event becomes a disaster? There's a particular definition for a disaster. For an event to become a disaster, there are standards. Number one, there should be at least one people who is a casualty. Number two, there is an X amount of damages for a particular event. No, and number three, a particular country will call for a humanitarian assistance to address a particular event before such event becomes a disaster. No? But we don't call it a natural disaster because it is not a disaster that is caused by nature. We have to call it actually a human caused disaster, given that most of the things that influencing right now it's because of the human activities. So to continue, the Earth's atmosphere consists of gases like carbon dioxide, nitrous oxide, and methane. And these are all belong to the family of the greenhouse gases. These greenhouse gases occur naturally, no? Which means incoming energy from the sun hits the Earth's surface. No? Then the Earth absorbs some of that energy to heat the surface of the planet, no? While some of those gets reflected and goes back into the space. These greenhouse gases are trap the energy and send it back to the Earth's surface, heating it up more, and this is what we call the greenhouse effect. No? So let me just reiterate that. No? So this is the relationship of the sun and the planet. No? So the planet are composed of the atmosphere, stratosphere, and so forth. No? So when the sun goes into the planet, we expect that particular heat, have to go out of the planet as well. No? Have to go out. Okay. But because we produce what we call greenhouse gases, no? Which you can see here, the one in encircling the Earth. I think this is a light. What color is this? This is a light orange or pinkish color. These greenhouse gases, no, traps that particular heat coming from the sun, and also the heat, the carbon dioxide or the methane, the nitrous oxide that is produced because of human activities. No? And since we continue to trap that within our planet, then that's the one that caused the increased temperature kasi natatrap siya and it doesn't go out of the planet, which causes what we call global warming. No? So take note, no, hindi rin po pareho ang definition ng global warming at saka ng climate change. No? Greenhouse effect is actually natural to the Earth, no? As it warms the planet to keep life on Earth, no, stable. Without it, the world would be frozen and uninhabitable place. No? The concentration of greenhouse gases in our atmosphere for the past 800,000 years ago was just between 200 to 280 parts per million. By the way, the greenhouse gases concentration are measured in parts per million, or what we call the ppm. No? And there is one research facility in Hawaii who provides this measurement, no, for the entire world. No? So what does a ppm means? No? It means that 1 ppm for a given gas means, for example, that there is one molecule of that gas in every 1 million molecules of air. No? So that is the scientific definition of the ppm. Over the course of thousands of years, no? So take note, 800,000 years, our climate goes to a natural cycle. But in the past century, the start of the Industrial Revolution and the advent of coal-powered steam engines, human activities have vastly increased the volume of greenhouse gases emitted into the atmosphere. Now, so take note, when we talk of Industrial Revolution, we're talking of the Industrial Revolution actually started in the United Kingdom during the time between 1850 to the year 1900. So in most climate change communication, this period is always cited. No? This is always the reference period because that is the start of the Industrial Revolution. No? So from there, from the year 1950s, no, just right after World War II, a dramatic increase in the burning of fossil fuels vastly accelerated the concentration of greenhouse gases being pumped into the atmosphere. No? So please take a particular attention on this graph. No? So if you would be able to see, for the past 800,000 years, okay, the ppm, the planet's ppm, is just within this range, which is 200 up to a maximum of the, I think 300. No? That is only within that particular range. No? But in the 1950s, just right after World War II, no, you see that it breaches the dash line, no, that was after World War II. And at present, at the year 2020, we're already at this current level. I think we are almost reaching, or we have already breached the 420 ppm. No? So our objective is how to bring this ppm down to this particular system, to this particular system, to address the glooming crisis on the climate issue. In this particular graph, the Earth has not seen that this greenhouse gas emission in the atmosphere for millions of years, no? Because they say that this one, the period where we end right now, happened also in a different geological period. No? The higher concentration of greenhouse gases, carbon dioxide in particular, is causing extra heat to be trapped and global temperature to rise. No? So take note, carbon dioxide is actually the gas that is being produced because of the human activities. No? So some of the main human activities that emits greenhouse gases includes fossil fuel burning. And when we talk of fossil fuel burning, we're talking of the three types of gases. No? These are coal, and this is oil, and this is natural gas. No? So these are all fossil fuel, meaning we get it below the earth, no? Or under the ground. No? We extract it from the ground. So that is a fossil fuel. Also coming from animals, no? Especially by grazing land. No? So makikita nyo dito yung mga picture ng, well, primarily by beef. No? Agriculture is both a contributor and a victim of the climate change. Of course, deforestation and waste and pollution. No? Bakit ang deforestation is always linked to climate change? No? And yet deforestation, the act of killing our forest, is a human activity. No? One is a tree is actually what we call a carbon sink. When we talk a carbon sink, it sequesters carbon dioxide. In plain science, during our general science, alam natin na ang isang tree or anumang halaman, sumisipsip yan ng carbon dioxide. So when we cut trees, no, the carbon dioxide na sinipsip niya, kailangan niyang i-release yun back to the air. No? So that adds to the greenhouse gases. No? According to the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, concentrations of carbon dioxide, methane, and nitrous oxide have increased to levels unprecedented in at least the last 800,000 years. Indeed, the atmosphere's share of carbon dioxide, the planet's chief climate change contributor, has risen by 40% since the pre-industrial times. The warming of the Earth's temperature has then occurred in the past 40 years, with the 7 most recent years being the warmest year on record. The years 2016 and the year 2020 are tied for the warmest year on record in the entire human history. Right now, our world is more than 1 degree Celsius hotter than pre-industrial revolution, or about 1800. And the worst is we are on track to hit 1.5 degrees Celsius in one of the next 5 years. In the forecast of the World Meteorological Organization, we expect to hit 1.5 degrees Celsius between now until the year 2025. Later on, we would be able to understand why 1.5 is a critical figure. You'll be able to see that 1.5 is a small figure, no, in terms of temperature, but of course, in terms of impact, it is different. The impact is so huge. No? Rising temperatures result in catastrophic consequences and major changes in the Earth's system, including rising sea levels, more intense rainfall and storms, droughts, massive damage to ecosystems and biodiversity, and higher rates of disease and crop failures. To halt climate change and avoid some of the most severe consequences, a significant reduction in greenhouse gas emissions into the atmosphere is required. International climate discussions have centered on setting objectives to limit future warming to 2 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial level. Since the planet has already warmed by 1 degree Celsius, scientists have calculated that atmospheric greenhouse gas concentrations must not rise above 450 ppm in order to stay within the 2 degrees Celsius limit. But the 2 degrees Celsius limit is not a Goldilocks limit. It means that even if we aim for 2 degrees Celsius, but that is not the aim of the vulnerable countries, we still have to adapt and mitigate the climate issue or the climate crisis. The UN's climate research body, or the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, published this special report in 2018, urging world leaders to strive forward towards limiting warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius to prevent catastrophic consequences on weather extremes, ecosystems, human health, and infrastructure predicted at 2 degrees centigrade warming. And to meet that tougher target, global emissions must fall by roughly 45% from 2010 levels by the year 2030, or 9 years from today, with net zero emissions by the year 2050. Meeting those objectives will need significant reductions and removal of global greenhouse gas emissions, not only by Philippines, but of course by the entire world. Just to also give you the context, Philippines is not a major contributor in greenhouse gases. We are a low emitting country. Our contribution is only around 0.3%. No, it's very small, 0.3% compared to more developed countries. Historically, the number one contributor is United States, United Kingdom, and of course, European states, and some other Middle Eastern countries. In this part of Asia, major contributor includes Japan and Indonesia. But even if we are a low contributing country, it is part of our responsibility to join hands with the rest of the world leaders to address the climate issue. Because they say that climate change is global, okay? But the impacts of climate change is local. Because the impacts would depend on how vulnerable our people are, how vulnerable the communities are, and how vulnerable the country is. So take note, the impacts are local, but climate change is actually a global phenomenon. So what are the impacts of climate change, at least in the Philippine in the Philippines setting. No? So the average annual mean temperature in the country, according to Pag-asa, increased by 0.65% since 1951, rising an average rate of 0.1 degrees Celsius per decade, and is projected to increase 1.7 degrees Celsius to 3 degrees Celsius by the year 2050. Higher temperatures are generally expected for all regions in the country by the year 2050. Pag sinabi natin all regions, that is from north to south, and the rates doubling to 2020 levels. Warming will be worst in Mindanao. So for those people who are in Mindanao, I was just in Bangsang Moro a week ago, and actually I met your regional director in Barm, over a breakfast coffie during my visit to Bangsamoro last week. No? And in that particular place, it's really pretty hot. No? And the impact in Mindanao, of course, Mindanao is a food basket in the Philippines. No? So if you're going to imagine more boldly, this might impact our food security, given that Mindanao is a food basket. So this causes drastic changes in weather patterns, an increase in frequency, intensity, and duration of floods, and an increase in frequency and intensity of droughts in the face of the climate change. No? Let me just focus on this slide. No? Can we turn off? Can we mute that person again? Okay, thank you. Okay, so let me just focus on this slide. No? I was visiting the municipality of the North UP and the municipality of Datu Abdullah Sangki in the province of Maguindanao. No, and the two natural hazards. Okay, the two natural hazards that is prevailing in this particular province is actually flooding and dry season or drought. Okay, these are the two natural hazards that they're being faced. No? So when we were trying to analyze flooding, no, in these two particular municipalities, North Tupi is actually a highland municipality. It means they are situated in the mountains. Datu Abdullah Sangki, which is in short term DAS, belongs to lowland, no? Meaning it's a flat area. No? So let us go to DAS. No? DAS is a lowland area. When we were trying to analyze why flooding is happening in this particular part of the country, we realized that that particular area is actually a catch basin of all water coming from the mountains. No? So since this it's a lowland, it's a catch basin. The area where water flows, especially the rivers, can no longer contain the amount of the water coming from the mountains. So even if it is a small rain, a short rainfall, there is a possibility that the entire town would be flooded. Okay. So when we try to analyze why the water from the mountain keeps going down to the municipality, we realize that the mountain in that particular area, which is already outside the boundaries of the municipality, no, is already denuded, no, it's already deforested. So which means that every time it rains, the water just will continue to flow down, no, downstream, no. Then it would flow to the river, and then the river will continue to overflow, and then eventually the entire municipality, practically, you know, almost 90% of the municipality would be experienced flooding. And since the municipality is predominantly agriculture, so you would expect all their crops, no, either corn or rice, would be affected. No? So try to imagine that situation. No? Perhaps for those people who live in the metro, very difficult to imagine that situation. And I'm not saying this only happening in Maguindanao. I think in other parts of the country, this is also happening. No? But we have to provide solutions to this, because both green and gray solutions have to be provided, so that communities like this, no, will not be able to experience this kind of flood. No? So when we try to analyze that situation, is that climate change induced flooding, or is that human caused flooding? No? 'Di ba? Pag i-attribute mo, kanino ba talagang kasalanan, no? Na ito, no? So, una, kung ang bumabagsak na ulan is just normal, regular, a natural event, 'di ba? And then hindi naman sinisipsip yung tubig ng bundok simply because kalbo na yung bundok at kailangan bumaba ng tubig dun sa river, no? And that amount of rainfall would eventually flood the entire municipality. No? So that is, if you're going to look at it, for me, it's a human caused flooding. No? Because if the forest remains to be forested, no? If we didn't cut the trees in that particular forest, then the possibility of the water going downstream would be minimized, no? Than removing all trees into that. In fact, the local people there even shared with us who are the companies operating in that particular area or in that particular forest. And we also asked the municipality whether there are reforestation projects so that the forest cover in that particular area would increase. No? But of course, we have to remember that the green solution, like reforesting an area, doesn't happen overnight. No? Because when we talk of tree planting, hindi naman talaga puno ang tinatanim natin. No? Halaman po ang tinatanim natin na over the years, pinapanalangin natin na maging puno siya para pa-address ang climate issue. So kung ang green solution will not be an immediate solution, then we have to provide the gray solution or the necessary infrastructure to address the flooding in the area, like providing river walls or sea walls, providing dikes so that there would be no flooding in the area, or providing rainwater catchment in some of the communities so that at least yung rain, instead na bumaksak sa river, would be able to be catched by these rainwater catchment. So there are particular solutions for this problem. So moving forward, the Philippines has been constantly on the top of the rankings of countries that suffered most from global warming. The 2021 Global Climate Risk Index report that was released this year has ranked the Philippines the fourth among countries most affected by extreme weather events, no? From the year 2000 to the year 2019. So over the past 20 years. No? And if you're going to look at the slide that you can see in the screen right now, no, you look at the particular, you zero in on the particular number 317, no? And that is the number of natural events that entered the Philippines for the past 20 years. No? No, even if we have the most number of natural events, we are not ranked number one, no? Because the number one is Puerto Rico, Myanmar, and Haiti. There is a sense that this is a sign of preparedness on some communities or some provinces or regions in handling a particular natural event. And in the data given by the Natural Disaster Risk and Management Council, the top 10 costliest typhoons that hit the country happened in the last 20 years, from the year 2001 until the year 2020. In fact, Typhoon Goni and Typhoon Ulysses is the two costliest typhoons, no, for that happened in the last 20 years. No? And just to highlight the amount of rainfall or the amount of destruction to lives and livelihoods, the top 8 costliest typhoons happened for the past 10 years. So if these numbers are not enough to convince us that there has to be a solution to adapt and to mitigate this issue, I think actually our deadline should have been yesterday. It's not even today. So this topic that we are talking about actually is already passé. No? Over the last decades, the country has experienced extreme weather events that resulted in severe damage and loss, a phenomenon that scientists trace to global warming. These extremes include severe flooding, which we experienced in Typhoon Ondoy in 2009, devastating storm surges, which we experienced in Typhoon Yolanda in 2013, deadly landslides, which we experienced in St. Bernard, Southern Leyte in 2006, and extreme droughts, which was experienced in 1997 and 1998, and it was repeated in 2016 to 2015 to 2016, and then 2018 to 2019. So drought is normally exacerbated when there's a period of El Nino. And El Nino is a seasonal period that happens between 4 to 7 years. So meron na tayong forecast when it's gonna happen, 4 to 7 years. So if the last El Nino happened in 2019, the next El Nino may happen perhaps by the year 2023, and 2023 to 2026. So this is something at least we can forecast. So just to continue, Typhoons Ondoy, Pepeng, Sendong, Pablo, and Yolanda all together have claimed the lives of around 10,000 people or 10,000 Filipinos and caused economic damage and loss amounting to almost 900 billion pesos. These have also severely affected areas in Mindanao historically not hit by strong typhoons. So specifically, what are the impacts of climate change in the country? So it includes, number one, change in annual mean rainfall. Based on the projection, a change in annual precipitation from negative 2.4 to 16.4% by the year 2050. We will experience increases in rainfall, particularly evident in most areas of Luzon and Visayas, while Mindanao is protected to undergo a drying trend. Average annual rainfall increases over most parts of Luzon and Visayas is expected to as much as 16% by the year 2050. In contrast, there is a general reduction in regional average rainfall in Mindanao to as much as 11% by the year 2050. So what are the implications? If the amount of rainfall in Luzon and Visayas would increase by 16% until the year 2050, and if our urban centers like Metro Manila are not prepared to accept this kind of amount of rainfall, then we cannot negate flooding. Okay, we cannot negate flooding. So very simple ways. If we do not observe Republic Act 9003 or the Ecological Solid Waste Management Act, if we do not demand from our local government to implement this law very strictly by segregating our waste in our own backyard, and they do not observe how they dispose waste through this law, then we are just to blame in terms of flooding in the area. If government does not continue its flood control projects, if we continue to throw our garbage anywhere as if the entire Metro Manila is our trash can, then you expect that all of these would go to our canals and to our river systems, and eventually would clog our waterways, and eventually during rainfall or rainy season comes, it would flood. Hindi po natin pinag-uusapan dito yung sea level rise. Pinag-uusapan lang po natin dito paano po natin i-manage yung ating waste. Pero hindi rin po natin pwedeng sabihin na there is no potential of sea level rise, because continuous rainfall would actually cause sea level rise, or even the rising of the level of water of the river, and then eventually may overflow. And the problem of sea level rise is also exacerbated because, like for example, in Metro Manila, I learned that movement of land and water sometimes are indirectly proportional. So minsan, pag tumataas po ang tubig ng dagat, ang lupa po bumababa, especially sa Metro Manila, na short of saying that is a sinking city. Just like what is happening to Jakarta in Indonesia, it is also a sinking city. And there are a lot of factors there. Of course, yung pagtaas ng sea level, that is climatic event. Pero yung pagiging sinking city or sinking land ng Manila, that is not a climatic event. That is a human cause event. No? So makikita nyo how it plays both climate change on the rising of sea level and yung pagbaba ng lupa ng Metro Manila, which is a human cause event. No? Okay, the next impact of climate change would be intense drought. Okay, according to Pag-asa, reveals that water collection in Angat Dam has decreased 500 million cubic meters for the past 50 years. No? So when we talk of drought, it is a problem of water. No? And because it is a problem of water, it also would impact to our food security. No? So syempre, alam naman po natin, pag kulang po ang tubig, mas mabuti nga po na walang kuryente compared sa walang tubig. No? So nung naranasan po ng Metro Manila, yung water crisis, I think 2019 if I'm not mistaken, but it is not pandemic time, di ba? Naranasan po natin yan. Di ba? Marami po nagsasabi sa akin, mabuti na po na sana na walang kuryente compared kung walang tubig. No? Because sabi nga nila, water is life. No? Water is life. Okay, so the next impact would be rising sea levels. No? Observed sea level rise is remarkably highest at 60 centimeter in the Philippines. In fact, 3 times the global average of only 19 centimeter. Given this, sea level rise increases the risk of flooding and storm damage. Projected impacts of 1 meter sea level rise in many areas of the country will show vast proportions being inundated, affecting coastal settlements and livelihoods. No? According to the estimates of the National Mapping and Resource Information Authority, a 1 meter sea level rise can translate into an estimated land loss of 129,000 hectares. About 70% of our over 1,500 municipalities located along the coast are vulnerable to sea level rise. No? And according to an Oxfam study, found that the sea level rise, floods will damage fish farms and increase acidification of the oceans, which would reduce farm fish yield by as much as 90% by the year 2050. No? So dito na po pumapasok ang challenge po ng food security. So the next impact is actually food security. According to studies, that for every 1 degree Celsius increase in minimum temperature, rice plants, no, ang bigasan po natin or palayan, has been shown to drop yield by as much as 10%. No? So take note of the proportionality. No? For every 1 degree rise in temperature, we would experience 10% decrease in yield in rice production. In the past, farmers in the Philippines had to stop growing rice completely during El Nino periods or during drought. And according to the Asian Development Bank study, that rice production in the Philippines could drop by as much as 50 to 70%, no, if climate change will not be abated. No? Another impact will be the negative effects on forests and biodiversity. Okay, Philippine forests host a large variety of plants and animal species, have been declared as one of the world's biodiversity hotspots. The IPCC predicts that with 1.5 degrees Celsius to 2.5 degrees Celsius in temperature is in a span of 50 to 100 years, 30% of species would be at risk of extinction. A substantial increase in temperature will cause the migration of plant and animal species with narrower temperature tolerance to more suitable habitat as their form of adaptation. Most vulnerable are those species that have difficulties in migrating as a form of survival. So let me just connect it to the current pandemic, because siguro at the start of the pandemic, a lot of you would be thinking, is the pandemic related to the climate crisis, or it is not? No? Well, most scientists would tell you that there is no direct relationship of the pandemic with the climate crisis. But of course, since all systems on this planet are interconnected, there is always the indirect relationship of the pandemic and the climate crisis. No? We know that the pandemic is caused by what we call zoonotic disease, which is the transmission of a virus coming from an animal to a human being. But the transmission was done from a primary animal, and it needed a intermediate animal before it is transmitted to a human being. But the transmission of COVID from humans to humans is not caused by the climate crisis. It's caused actually by the human itself, by us itself, which is different when we talk about dengue. Because dengue, transmission of dengue, the climate issue plays in that particular transmission. So which means that if it is more hotter and more dry periods, there is a possibility that there are more flies would be flying around that would cause dengue. And the transmission is not caused by humans to humans, but it is caused by that particular fly, which would be exacerbated by a hotter climate. So ito po yung makikita natin, no? na difference, no? How climate plays in the entire system. So another impact would be damage to infrastructure. Infrastructure facilities that are directly exposed oftentimes to prolonged and frequent rainfall, strong winds and higher waves, temperature variations can lead to accelerated structural fatigue and materials failure. For examples, power transmission structures. We've seen that, no? Pag masyadong malakas po ang bagyo, may mga power transmission lines na bumabaksak, no? Have to give way. Road pavements, nakikita rin po natin yan na pag minsan malakas po ang bagyo, nagkakaroon po ng landslide sa mga matataas na lugar, ang mga kalye po sa mga bundok ay nasisira, and places greater demands on the construction and operation and maintenance of flood control and drainage structures, seawalls and port structures, and public buildings such as schools and healthcare facilities. These could be severe in areas where infrastructures are not designed to fully cope with the effects of climate change. Another impact is, of course, the impact of climate change on economic growth. Based on the study of the Asian Development Bank on the economics of climate change, the country stands to lose 6% of its GDP annually by the year 2100 if we continue to disregard climate risk. This same study found that the Philippines invest 0.5% of its GDP in climate change adaptation. It can avert losses up to 4% of its GDP by the year 2100, clearly a short-term investment with a long-term eightfold gain. A World Bank study, on the other hand, revealed that the annual economic losses of the Philippines from disasters total to $500 million or about 4% of our GDP. And when we are able to finish all of these impacts, I just wanted also to share with you that to change the narrative of climate change, it is not only an environmental issue, because climate change is an everything issue, because it affects every facet of the Filipino life. Apektado po lahat, hindi lang po ang environment. The next impact of climate change would be energy. Energy technologies, particularly on power generation from renewable resources, rely greatly on the climate for its resource. With projected changes in precipitation, humidity, wind speed, and cloudiness, energy technologies will be affected, resulting in changes in the quantity and timing of renewable resource in its operational performance and energy production. So this one zeroes in the impacts of climate change on our RE sources, like wind, solar, and hydro sources of the energy. The next impact is, of course, migration. Migration from rural to urban or vice versa. Communities along coastal areas directly impacted by extreme weather events and submerged by sea level rise or inundation led to not only substantial socioeconomic losses, of coastal structures, but also displacement of the population and shift in livelihood sources and strategies. So makikita po natin yan, hindi lang po natin napapansin whether there are climate-induced migration, but in the study made by the Global Report on Internal Displacement, which was released, I'm not so sure whether it was last May or this June, the 2021 edition. Actually, if you look at study, Philippines is actually the leading nation who has the leading nation in terms of internal displacement, no? Because of natural events and because of conflict, but predominantly natural event. And if they are internally displaced, the possibility that these communities or these people would migrate is high. And of course, another impact would be poverty. Poverty limits the population's capacity to bounce back immediately in the face of disasters and to shift rapidly to new adaptation modes that require financial resources to materialize. It is also a driver of rural to urban migration. Rural poor in lowland agricultural areas also been migrating upward to forest lands for better agricultural opportunities. This has further contributed to the situation of the forest in the country's watershed. So makikita po natin na poverty exacerbates the vulnerable sectors, no? At kanina nabanggit na rin po ni Jonah who are the vulnerable sectors, and of course that include children and youth, girls and women, those people with disabilities, and etc. In fact, in one study, in one book, the title of the book was Project Drawdown, 100 Solutions to Reverse Global Warming, and it was edited by an American philanthropist by the name of Paul Hawken. One of the top 10 solutions that was cited in that particular book, and empowering women is one of the solutions to address the climate issue. The next concern or the next impact would be public health emergencies. The health sector also stands to bear the brunt of climate change, as diseases, disabilities, and deaths are consequences of these hazards. The health sector is usually left to handle the management and rehabilitation of victims. Among the most likely impacts of climate change on the health sector include increase in endemic morbidity and mortality due to diarrhea disease, exacerbation of the abundance and toxicity of cholera due to increases in coastal water temperature, and an expansion of the natural habitats of vector-borne and water-borne diseases. Climate change also brings heat waves and other extreme events, as heat stress can not only make working conditions unbearable, it increases the risk of cardiovascular, respiratory, and renal diseases. Certain groups have higher susceptibility to climate-sensitive health impacts. The elderly, for example, or pregnant women, or those marginalized due to their income or their culture, or even illnesses such as HIV. Malnutrition and undernutrition are a concern as an impact of climate change on food security, particularly in relation to floods and drought. So makikita na po natin yung interconnectedness, no, that plays, no, with the presence of climate change, especially on public health emergencies. The next impact is putting our women more endangered. Okay, women belong to the most vulnerable and at risk to climate change. Women, especially those in minority group, have lesser capabilities to adapt due to limited access to services, including education, water, sanitation, nutrition, and health. A paper released by the World Health Organization examining gender, climate change, and health stated that the impacts of natural hazards such as drought, floods, and storms kill more women than men and tend to kill women at a younger age. Climate-sensitive and gender-specific health impacts affect women disproportionately than men. On agriculture, globally, women account 42% of the agricultural labor force, and 48% of women in Southeast Asia are employed in agriculture, according to the Food and Agriculture Organization. And with climate change, various gender issues arise, which include women's access over land and lack of financial and other resources to improve and diversify their economic activities. Let us look at the Philippines an example. The government and the development agencies in the country have been working together to improve the rights and resources of women farmers. The Department of Agriculture, the Department of Agrarian Reform, the Philippine Commission on Women, the local government units are providing gender sensitivity trainings for farmers and fisher folk to raise the awareness on gender equality. In terms of gender, climate change, and energy, approximately 2 billion people in Asia Pacific depend on wood, charcoal, and animal waste for their basic needs, such as for cooking and heating. Because poor and marginalized people tend to rely on locally sourced biomass for their daily energy needs, any stress on their surrounding ecosystems, climatic or otherwise, is likely to render them increasingly vulnerable to biomass and hence energy scarcities. Such scarcities take a significant toll on poor rural women. Rural women and girls are the primary energy producers for the household. Further, they tend to depend on small-scale agriculture and locally available resources to support their livelihoods and to fulfill their household obligations. Energy poverty leads to greater health risk and a lack of time to focus on income generating, educational, and other self-nurturing activities. Furthermore, the use of these solid fuels, especially by women at the household level, increases their exposure to environmental health risk. More than 1.2 billion people in Southeast Asia mainly use polluting fuels for cooking. The situation is much bleaker in rural areas where around 85% of the population cooks mainly with polluting fuels. That is why there is a strong need to adapt and localize low emission technologies that benefit vulnerable women and communities to further improve their situation and increase their resiliency to climate change impacts. Investments in modern and sustainable energy services is a key to alleviate women's poverty, help improve their lives and health. Climate change is a phenomenon that affects the entire population, particularly those who are situated at the most vulnerable sectors of our society. I am talking about our local communities, our farmers, our fisher folks, and our indigenous peoples. Scientists all over the world agree that it is imperative to limit the rise in global temperature to below 1.5 degrees Celsius if climate vulnerable countries like the Philippines are to survive and thrive. Doing so is crucial in reducing disaster risk and achieving the sustainable development goals. This compels us in government to integrate climate policy in our long-term development strategies while carrying our immediate, disinformed, and evidence-based interventions. So what are some policies or actions related to addressing climate change for vulnerable sectors? The Philippines, as a member of the UNFCCC or the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, recognizes the convention's endeavors towards gender and climate change action, and countries to support these endeavors by coming up with ways to improve the existing gender action plans. Specifically for children, the Philippines is an active member of various international agreements that address the impacts of climate change to children, Some of these are the Convention on the Rights of the Child that underscores child-specific needs and rights, the UN United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change that addresses the fight on climate change, and the Sustainable Development Goals, or the Agenda 2030, that aims to end poverty, protect the planet, and ensure that all people enjoy peace and prosperity. At the local level, the Climate Change Act 2009 notes the importance of gender mainstreaming in climate action. The act also recognizes the vital aspects of women's voices in climate policy and action formulation, which is why one of the members of the board is the chairperson of the National Commission on the Role of the Filipino Women. We have the National Climate Change Action Plan, where one of its main components is the identification of differential impacts of climate change on men, women, and children. We also have the Philippine NDC, or the Nationally Determined Contribution, which upholds the importance of meaningful participation of women, children, youth, persons with diverse sexual orientation and gender identity, differently abled and indigenous people, elderly, local communities, civil society, faith-based organizations, and the private sector, and recognizes the indispensable value of inclusion and collaborative participation of local government in implementing climate actions. We have the local climate change action plans that are being crafted by the local government units as mandated by RA 9729, or the Climate Change Act of the 2009. And we also have the Philippine Youth Development Plan, which aims to protect the environment as part of the recognition of the youth development. Okay, Hans, let's go to closing. So in closing, the resolute and urgent global response to the pandemic demonstrated the remarkable capacity of human society to put emergency brake on business as usual. It showed that we can act as one and radically change our ways and our systems to contain the rapid spread of a deadly virus for the greater good of all. The same unity, resolve, and urgency we should apply in containing the climate emergency, in disaster response, and in pursuing low carbon and sustainable development. As the main agency mandated to train and certify qualification of skilled workers in the Philippines, we count on TESDA to lead this new path towards a cleaner and more sustainable country. Through this event and beyond, let us learn from another, support each other's climate actions, advise on strategies, and strike convergence where possible. We in the government, especially the Climate Change Commission, are looking forward and stand ready for more meaningful partnerships and initiatives with you, with TESTA, for a safer and more resilient future for the Filipino nation. Thank you everyone for listening at mabuhay po tayong lahat. Maraming salamat po.
Yes, maraming salamat din po, Engineer Ludwig Federigan, for your presentation and sharing of knowledge about global climate change. Nasagot po talaga ang ating topic today. Ano po ang kailangang malaman ng TESDA ng ating general public with regard to global climate change. Thank you so much, Engineer Ludwig Federigan from the Climate Change Commission, and for your team as well sa Information and Knowledge Management Division of CCC. Maraming salamat po. Alright, so I'm pretty sure na lahat tayo ay nag-enjoy, natuwa at nadagdagan ng information natin ng ating knowledge about global climate change at kung gaano ito kahalagang mapag-usapan. Okay, at kung ano naman ang ating action or role to mitigate or to lessen its impact at ano pa ang pwede nating magawa para mas maalagaan ang ating environment. So with that, let me just check the number of our participants po. In our Zoom main room, kanina the highest was close to 100 participants. Binubuo ito ng ating ongoing trainees. So thank you very much for staying connected sa buong session po natin. Live streaming pa rin po tayo sa TESDA official Facebook page. Thank you very much to the TESDA Public Information and Assistance Division. The highest reactions, it was 611 reactions, but we'll check later after the webinar kung ilan po ang ating views, kung gaano po kalawak ang reach ng ating webinar program ngayon, since the TESDA official FB page has more than 2 million followers. So very excited kami to see the number of people all over the Philippines and even overseas na nakasama natin for this program. So allow me to just acknowledge our participants here, especially sa Facebook page. We saw your comments. So thank you very much for those connected po mula Baguio City, mula Caloocan City, from Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao. We also saw a participant na connected po mula sa Hong Kong. So thank you so much for joining us and appreciating also this program na para naman po sa publiko rin. Ayan, thank you. All right. And thank you also to the TESDA family, the TESDA personnel who are watching this program, the TESDA Women's Center personnel as well, our trainers and other participants po natin na kasama natin ngayon. And as mentioned kanina, our program has 3 parts. We are done with the first 2 parts. And now is the part for the open forum. I hope na kayo po ay nag-enjoy ng isang basong tubig muna before we go straight ahead with the questions po ng ating mga participants. Ayan. So let me just stop sharing for a while as we prepare for the open forum. Ayan. Actually, sir, marami silang tanong before the start of the program. We did our registration and there were questions already. At natutuwa ako na halos lahat na cover ng ating discussion then. So para sa iba that they want to clarify or ask pa po some questions, feel free to share them po as long as naging malinaw din naman siya sa ating presentation kanina. So we will filter your questions and your comments din po. But again, this is for everyone. Kindly share your question about global climate change. Ayan. Sir, simulan ko po sa pag-aalis ng myth o ng sabi-sabi o ng iniisip ng iba sa fact talaga about global climate change. Sa tanong, sir, na yung pagka-hole sa ating ozone layer, is it also a cause of the global climate change or global warming?
Okay, yung nangyaring ozone layer, I think there's a separate agreement on that. That is the Montreal Protocol. No? And I think over the years, na-address naman po yan because the latest study shows that that particular hole is already closing. No? But I have never come across any scientific declaration of the relationship of that particular hole and climate change.
I see. All right. Thank you so much po. At least naalis yung ganong dating nababalitaan na yun, nandun pa rin yung ozone hole na yan. So thank you so much, sir. And again, yung mga na-present kanina from CCC, ang ilan sa major contributory factor doon na talagang human-induced yung ating pinag-uusapang epekto ng global climate change. Engineer Ludwig, how about those people saying that I think the sun is to be blamed dito sa global warming? Mainit ang araw, so sobrang tindi ng araw dito sa lupa. What is your response to that? Dapat bang isisi natin sa araw, sa sinag nito ang global warming?
Well, early on in the presentation, I discussed the greenhouse effect. No? And in that particular slide, I showed you that while we recognize that the relationship of the sun and the planet is there, the sun, of course, sends its rays to planet Earth, and eventually these heat have to go back, no, have to bounce back outside the planet Earth. No? But because of that heat trapping, no, because of human activities, we continue to produce these gases that are being trapped, no, in the planet. No? That makes the planet more warmer, no, and gives rise to these climate change. No? So, wag na po tayong maghanap ng ibang sisisihin, no, para ma-justify yung ating mga activities, no, or unsustainable practices, no, because yung araw-araw naman po yan dumarating, no, and we are very lucky that we are living on this tropical part of the world, no, because there are some countries on the northern part, no, especially yung malapit sa Europe, that they don't even see the sun every day. No, most of their life it's always dark. No, so we have to be we are blessed. No, that we see the sun every morning we wake up. No?
I see. Ayan. Thank you. Thank you so much. Huwag daw pong isisi sa regalo ng Diyos na sun at sa kanyang rays. Kasi nga greenhouse effect talaga yan, greenhouse gases na human-induced activities ito. Ayan. But before I continue po, let me just share sa ating chat box. A lot of our trainees are sharing their thank you messages. Let me just mention that's from Barista, from Facilitate e-learning sessions, electronics, product assembly and servicing, dressmaking, food processing. So marami po nagpapasalamat sa Zoom room natin and also sa Facebook page. So again, as we have time for the open forum, let's grab this opportunity, especially sa ating participants po sa Facebook page. We have our team to monitor and share your question, lalo na kung hindi pa ito na-raise during the open forum. Okay. All right. So may dagdag lang tayong tanong doon, sir. Ang sabi-sabi din nila ay pagputok ng bulkan. Lalo na't ang Philippines din, di ba, sir, ay may mga ganyang experience na really, sir, ito ba ay isa ring contributing factor sa pag-init din ng Philippines na lupa?
Okay. Let us put a qualifying understanding of that. No? Earthquake and volcanic eruption has no relationship with climate. So climate change does not influence eruption and earthquake. So take note, it does not influence, meaning there are no existence of any scientific studies on this relationship. So these are all natural. Okay. Ngayon, ang pagputok ng bukan, ito ba ay may relationship? There is an indirect relationship. Okay. Yung pagputok, no? Hindi yung giving rise to eruption. Pag nag-erupt na. Okay, pag nag-erupt na. Remember when what is volcano is that erupted way back in the 1990s? The one here in Central Luzon.
Is it the Mayon, sir?
No, not Mayon. The one in Pinatubo.
Pinatubo. Yeah, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, okay. When Mount Pinatubo erupted way back in 1990, I wish I am correct na because I remember. Because practically the entire Metro Manila woke up with ashfall in their roofs, no? Na kulay puti, no? Umabot yan hanggang dito. I experienced that. There are scientific studies that because of the eruption of Mount Pinatubo, the world becomes a little colder within the next 2 years. No? Take note, hindi warmer. No, it becomes a little colder. No? Kumbaga yung warming niya, yung level of warming niya nabawasan or tumigil, no, or naging static, no? No, na sinasabi na itong sulfur dioxide na ini-emit ng mga volcanoes, hindi siya nagko-contribute sa pag-warm, bagkus binabawasan niyo po yung pag-warm, no? Pero hindi ko po ibig sabihin na manalangin po tayo na magkaroon tayo ng volcanic eruption palagi. No, hindi po yun ang aking mensahe, no. That is not the message. No? But I'm saying that volcanic eruption like Mount Pinatubo makes the world a little colder 2 years after it erupted.
I see. All right. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that and for clarifying that part also, Engineer Ludwig. We appreciate our trainees for helping us out. Nakakatuwa naman kayo sa kasaysayan. From Barista and Pels, they share the Mount Pinatubo info kanina. So maraming salamat po. Additional question lang din po. Kanina sa presentation, Engineer Ludwig, there were data or statistics na nagme-measure talaga sa init, na measure no, sa init ng temperature sa lupa natin. So kindly clarify, anong pag-measure ito? Sinasabi nila it's gonna be the core, di ba? Yung core or surface ni Earth. Or ano ito, sir? Satellite galing sa NASA, yung atmosphere, measurement ng init. Is it outside or core or surface? Ito, sir, na sinasabi natin the Earth is getting warmer.
One is like for example in the Philippines, right now Pag-asa already have projected measurement
Mhm.
of temperature. No? In fact, meron na yung publication last year. No? Pag-asa published the Philippine Climate Extremes Report. No? And this extreme report actually tells us the average, for example, no, in terms of temperature, the average temperature daytime, the average temperature nighttime, the warmest temperature on what particular year, either it is the medium or high emission. No? So meron na tayong mga projected na ganyan. In terms of rainfall, sinasabi na rin yan, gaano katagal ang dry spell, gaano katagal ang wet days. No? All of these data are really available. And this is not only on a per region basis. Actually, this is on a per province basis. Yung data natin, bawat probinsya na available yan. No? So if the local government units are not yet aware, no, they can always go to Pag-asa and get this particular data, no, because these are very useful in terms of planning, no. Napaka-importante siya in terms of planning para sa kanilang mga munisipyo or sa LGU, no.
All right. Okay.
So available siya, available ang mga data na to.
Yes, all right. Thank you so much. Kaya nga sir, daman natin ang pagiging accurate na ng Pag-asa pagdating sa prediction talaga ng ating ano din.
Jonah, I wanted to share with
yes.
you, no?
Apo.
Kasi some people may be asking, how come there is a study that we, like the graph that I showed you, that the parts per million over 800,000 years, no? How can human have that particular data?
Yes. Opo.
Okay. There is one repository of all of these measurement. They normally, what they do is they normally dig that underneath the earth, no? And then they keep this deposited underneath the earth. And there is that one repository who keeps all of this data that it is available, no? But take note, no? Yung verifiable data, science would always say, are always the baseline, which is 1850 to 1900 na data. Ito talaga verifiable na data. The rest, of course, are references. Yung mga 800,000 years na data that we have. But yung 1850 to 1900, those are verifiable data.
Yes, okay. Noted dun, sir, no? Same figure, same data. Yung nakikita din natin even sa other references, including NASA as presented kanina. Yan. So, what we're doing now sa first round ng question is pag-aalif ng myth o ng sabi-sabi o inaakala sa talagang fact about the global climate change. Mag-last question lang ako, sir, sa ating raise na question dito. Sabi kasi nila po, since nagka-ice age naman noon, is there a probability na baka makabalik ito and it will solve the issue of global warming? Ang science ba nakaisip na ng ganon, or ano kayang probability noon? Kasi we're thinking of solutions. Then Engineer Ludwig, probable ba yan? What can you comment on that?
Okay, this is a very interesting question, Jonah. Well, unang-una, Ice Age exists in the movies. Okay, so I think there will still be Ice Age movies upcoming. No? But that question already was asked way back in 1978. I got hold of a National Geographic 1978 issue. I don't know if, well, I suppose most of you here have not been born in 1978. I'm not so sure. But I got hold of that particular copy. In fact, I still have that copy. And in that particular edition, science asked, are we going to go into another ice age, or are we going to a warmer planet? That was the question in 1978. And that was how many years ago? That was 21. That was 43 years ago. It was 43 years ago, 4 decades ago. And I think 43 years after, or 40 years after, we know already the answer. That we are moving to a warmer planet. So an ice age may no longer be possible, except in the movies.
Yes, opo, at naging blockbuster yun din talaga. Kaya sila napaisip, can it be possible? Ayan. So, thank you so much, Engineer, for those responses po sa first
But
round.
Jonah, just let me
Yes,
just
yes.
add,
Opo.
if our young people here is thinking whether we had ice age in human history, yes, we did. Yes, we did.
Yes.
We did had. Kasi kung hindi po tayo nagkaroon ng ice age, syempre, di ba, yung change ng climate, remember, we can still refer to dinosaurs which existed in human history. Although, syempre, right now, all of them are gone. Di ba? All of them are gone. So even at this stage, if we don't respond to climate change, some of the animals that we know will be eventually be gone. No? And the next generation is unable to see them. I think one of the things that sometimes I use an example was the number of tigers, the number of big cats, the number of big cats. And then I realized that over the years, we lost 95% of the number of big cats that we have in the world. So time will come that I do not know whether in my generation, but perhaps not, probably in the next generation, they may not be able to see a tiger.
Yeah.
But we saw it in our generation. Well, makakita pa rin sila ng tiger sa mga natural museum, di ba? Yung mga buto, no, pinormang tiger. Di ba? But in real life, siyempre, posibleng hindi. Kaya for those who wanted to see tiger in real life, of course, an opportunity for you really to look for a tiger, no, para at least to tell yourself, I've seen a tiger. No? Baka in your own family or the next generation, they may not be able to see a tiger.
I see. Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much for emphasizing that po. So it's backed up by science and evidences na totoo ang ice age, but now we are moving to a warmer planet, as mentioned by Engineer Ludwig din po. Thank you, sir, for mentioning that we need to take care of our environment, to take care of wildlife din talaga bago ma-extinct itong ating mga pinag-uusapan din po. And so we hope that for the first round, naging malinaw kung alin ang sabi-sabi lang at alin yung facts about global climate change. Let us go now to other questions po related sa effects again ng global climate change. May question lang from the Electronic Products Assembly and Servicing. Yung paglakas po ng mga bagyo ngayon, na talagang papalakas sila ng papalakas na tumatama sa Philippines at sa ibang bansa din. Can we say directly, this is a cause, this is an effect ng global warming, sir?
Can you repeat again the question, Jonah?
Yes, from EPAS po ito, electronics.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. I think I can see that.
All right, okay.
Yung paglakas po ng mga bagyo na tumatama sa atin, cause din po pa to ng global warming. To answer Carla, anong probinsya ka? Para lang ma-relate natin.
Yes. Oh, sige, Ms. Carla, you can type in your answer po sa chat box then po.
Yeah. I wanted to know what province you're coming from.
Yes, oo. Kasi sir, I'm a wari-waray. Daanan talaga ng bagyo ang Leyte and Samar.
Oh,
So
Bicol.
talaga medyo sanay din.
Okay. I think this is a province that normally welcome typhoon.
Bicol.
But yeah,
yes.
generally Bicol. No? Carla, my maternal side is actually from Bicol. Anyway, depending which part of Bicol, no, but if you belong to the political jurisdiction of Congressman Salceda, no, in that particular part of Albay, he has the program of the zero casualty, no, because Congressman Salceda believes in the science of climate change, and Bicol being a frontliner to typhoons, no, you normally receive the entry of typhoons in the Philippines. No? To answer directly your question, yes, yung paglakas ng bagyo, yes, directly related po yan sa global warming. And general science or physics would explain that. No? Na, di ba, napag-aralan po natin, very basic in science, that the more hot it is, the more water evaporates.
Yes.
Di ba? Meron tayo niya sa science. Pag sobrang init yung tubig on the ground sa dagat, di ba, nag-evaporate po yan, and then nag-stay lang po yan sa sky at vapor, no? So pag dumadaan po si bagyo, nahagip po niya yan, tapos ibabaksak niya na ulan. No? So you try to imagine, the more warmer it is, the more evaporation you'll be able to generate in the skies. No? So when typhoon comes, no, depending on yung kanyang intensity in terms of strength, no, ibabaksak niya yung rainfall na yan. That's why when we look at typhoon announcements, aside from looking at the strength of the typhoon, kasi yung strength ng typhoon changes over time eh. No? Yung strength niya nagbabago po yan, no? Hindi sinabing, 'di ba minsan ng typhoon sasabihin tropical storm lang, so probably category 1, tapos it becomes category 2, category 3, no? Kasi nagbi-build up siya ng strength, no, before siya mag-drop, no? Before siya na mag-drop, no? So kailangan din po natin alamin yung amount of rainfall. No? Kasi especially kung nasa LGU ka, kung yung area mo is not capable to accept that amount of rainfall, syempre ang epekto nun baha. No? Baha talaga. No? At kung nasa low-lying area ka, well, syempre you're a victim of that. Diba? Ganun. I hope, Carla, nasagot ko yung tanong mo sufficiently.
Yes. Opo. Thank you. Thank you, Engineer Ludwig, for that answer po. And thank you, Ms. Carla of EPAS, for sharing your question din po. Salamat. Now, I think yung isa nating participant na merong, I'm not sure, Korean or Chinese characters, nasagot na ata ito kanina. It was clearly presented about climate change affecting farms and our food, the agriculture part, and the vulnerable sectors din talaga ang mas sinatamaan. So thank you. So let me again ask some question here. From Jericho Roblesa Simangan, I think sa FB page po ito. In sea level rise, is there a data that tells the sea is rising, and which agency of the government is monitoring this?
Okay. There are a lot of climate modeling tools that will tell us the level of the sea level rise, no, on a particular locality. In fact, we can also do that in the Philippines. No? A few weeks ago, I was playing a climate modeling tool. What would be the impact of the sea level rise on certain islands in the Philippines? No? Let's say by the year 2040, by the year 2050, or by the year 2100. And I realized there is one island, actually this is near northern Samar. I just forgot the name of that particular island. But when I looked at 2100 period, that particular island disappeared in the Philippine map. I will go back to you the name of that particular island. I just didn't get the name of the particular island. So there are a lot of climate modeling tools. No? So if you wish to play with the climate modeling tools, I can provide you some links so that you will be able to access for that. Now, are there government agencies studying sea level rise? No? Well, CCC is studying sea level rise. No? In fact, that is the thesis of the Secretary of the Climate Change Commission, sea level rise, no, and how we influence policy to address sea level rise. No? I am not so sure with other government agencies to have data on sea level rise. No? But if you needed some data, perhaps you can approach CCC. Perhaps we can share with you some data on sea level rise.
I see. Okay. Thank you, Engineer Ludwig, and for sharing that news. Oh yes, parang na balita rin yan, sir, no? Na talagang totoo ang sea level rise na ito na maaaring ikalubog ng isang isla o ng isang bahagi din ng lupa. Yan. Pero connected ito, Engineer Ludwig, sa inyong nabanggit from Michelle Lenny. Yung tanong niya po is requesting for your response din po. Habang tumatagal na mas umiinit ang panahon dahil natutunaw din ng mga glaciers as presented kanina, malaki po ba ang posibilidad na lumubog ang Pilipinas? Hindi na po isla ang kanyang tinatanong, kundi ang Pilipinas. And sir, for your kind response, please. Nababahala natin na. Pero thank you for sharing your question, Ms. Michelle. Thank you.
Michelle, hindi ka ba natatakot? O natatakot ka kaya gusto mo tanongin. Anyway, kanina sa shinare ko na data, I shared with you that 60% of, the level of sea level rise in the Philippines is projected to be 60% of the global average, no? Which is 60 centimeter. No? But of course, that is dependent on the rate of melting of ice sheets in both the Antarctica and the Arctic. Okay, take note. We have the Antarctica and the Arctic. No? So yung Arctic, dito, no? At sa North Pole po, tandaan niyo po, doon po nakatira si Santa Claus. No? So posible po na pagka naubos po ang ice sheets po doon, hindi ko na po alam kung saan po nakatira si Santa Claus. No? Baka dulat po siya ng habitat. No? So that's kidding aside. No? But there are a lot of the data will tell us the rate of the melting of the ice sheets in Antarctica. In the Arctic, not Antarctica, in the Arctic. No? So meron kasing philosophical question dyan eh. No? Merong isang nagtanong, it was before. Bakit po pag naglagay po bakit po ang yelo pag natunaw po sa isang baso, hindi naman po maapaw yung tubig sa baso? Tama, di ba? Meron ka isang baso ng tubig, no? And then naglagay ka ng yelo, natunaw yung yelo, hindi naman umaapaw yung tubig sa baso. Di ba? Okay. Para at least mawala tayong misconception na yun. That is a very interesting question. I got that question from a student from the University of Santo Tomas a long time ago. But of course, the composition of water in a cup is different from the composition of the ocean. No? And we know that when the ocean warms, the water expands. No? And that is also science. Water expands. Okay. So the melting of the glaciers, no? Take note, the melting of the glaciers is both happening, the ice on sea and the ice on land. Okay? So when the ice on land melts, okay, syempre yung tubig na to, yung melted composition na to, pupunta yan sa dagat. So dadagdag yan sa dagat. Diba? Because the glaciers is not only on the sea, it's also on land. Take note, no? It's also on land. So kailangan, madadagdagan talaga yung dagat. Ngayon doon sa tanong, ang buong Pilipinas po ba lulubog? Well, actually, that is a very interesting question, Jonah. Never explored that particular portion, whether the entire Philippines would submerge in water. We were more particular of whether the entire Metro Manila would submerge in water, and that is a possibility. No? The entire Metro Manila would submerge in water. When, of course, we cannot project that. No? That is a possibility, but we cannot project that because a lot of variables are still changing when you do modeling. No, hindi naman talaga siya static, no, na makukuha mo kaagad, no, but that is possible on the entire country. Posible, but I have not seen any modeling on that, no, and I have not seen any modeling on that. But there is a very nice lecture given by a scientist coming from Earth Observatory of Singapore. This was made last year during the pandemic, and he was telling in that particular lecture na kung ang dagat tumataas, ang lupa bumababa din po, no? So yung lupa natin ngayon bumababa rin po yan, no? Paano siya bumababa? One contributory factor kung bakit siya bumababa is because we extract groundwater. Diba? Marami pa rin sa atin who do deep well, no? Yung mga ganyan, no? Kahit nire-regulate niya ng government, ng National Water Resources Board, marami pa rin doon gumagamit niyan. Hindi lang po dito sa Metro Manila, but even in the provinces, marami pa rin doon gumagamit niyan. At makikita po natin, pag nawawala po yung portion na yan, underground groundwater na yan, yung syempre, nababakante po yung portion na yun, yung lupa po doon talagang bababa. To the possibility of our land na magsasubmerge, no? Ganyan. So, hindi lang po tumataas ang tubig kung habari naman po ang bumaba rin po ang lupa. And Metro Manila is one of the mega cities that are identified really for sea level rise. Given the highly urbanized setting of this particular part of the country.
Yes, yes. Thank you for sharing that there is a probability, but definitely that's why we are disseminating the right information. No, we need to really do something to lessen the effect and to mitigate this. So that question is actually connected sa question ni Alpha, I think taga Fels, right? At saka sa kanina pa from Barista, NC2. So connected po yung tanong na yon. So with the interest of time po, I think can we entertain 3 last questions po ito. Sir, tapusin ko lang yung kanilang mga tanong before we go to the prevention part para mas positive nating ma-end ito. Kasi talagang nakuha ang attention namin dito sa question po kanina sa upper part ng ating chat box from Jafet Longara. Yon. Sir, baka may take lang or response ang CCC dito. Did we ever consider this? Kasi tinatanong natin ang mangyayari talaga sa future ng Earth o ng Philippines. We have the problem of climate change, right? Of global warming. Paano to, sir? Itong problem ng sinasabi nilang stars, sun explosion, ganyan, natatakal di ba ito sa inyong mga usapin? Kasi sustainability of the earth, resiliency, lagi yan ang topic eh. How about this topic, sir? Talaga nga bang are we entertaining that thought pagdating dito? Ng ganyan, stars and sun explosion.
Ayan. Well, to be honest, we never come to that point. No? Never come yet to that point. No? Well, in a while, we thought of ecological collapse. But of course, that is a lot different than stars on sun explosion. But it would be very nice on my part to bring this as a baon for me and to check, the potential answer for this question.
I see. All right. Thank you. Thank you,
Yeah.
Engineer. Yan. Nakakatuwa po, no? Sa kanilang mga tanong, may ibang natatakot daw, kaya nagtatanong. But now, it's good that we are raising our consciousness and we're more concerned, di ba? Sa ating klima, sa ating environment. Ayan. So, i-park na po natin yan. Let's now go to more encouraging round 3. The last part po ng ating tanong, parang boxing lang, sabi ni Sir, ni Engineer Ludwig. Sir, may comment dito, Ms. Maribel Abier. Thank you for your comment po. Solar energy is very important. Available siya sa buong taon, sa buong mundo. So is there a government program that promotes the use of solar energy for our daily needs, for lighting and others? Baka meron din government agency na mas focused din dito na inyo ring ka-partner po.
We have a renewable energy law, and that has been signed a few years back, encouraging the use of our renewable resources, no? And that is of course sun, wind, hydro, no? And others. No? The challenge that we have right now, of course, is investments in this particular RE sources. No? Maganda itong sinabi nga ni Tommy Laurel, that
yes.
some offices, yes, some use solar energy, but we also hope that the entire government structure or the entire government bureaucracy would adapt to solar energy, at least promote the solar energy, para at least when we start talking about the climate issue, at least we're walking the talk. No? We're really applying it, on our side, no. Yeah.
Yes.
Good.
Yes.
I hope I answered that question.
Yes. Opo. Thank you very much, Engineer Ludwig, for that. Again, 2 last questions po tayo since limited din po ang ating time at saka sa time din as scheduled with our friends from the Climate Change Commission. Last 2 questions po tayo. Okay? So, balik ako sa question po nung ating registration ng participants. Sir, as a citizen, ano ang pwedeng nating magawa nga to mitigate the effects of global climate change? Isama na rin po natin yung mandate for TESDA, for an institution, a training institution like PwC, for a citizen, for this agency also to help mitigate the effect of global climate change.
Well, as an individual, this response is for an individual. No? As an individual, we can do a lot of ways, no, to address the climate crisis. No, if I can share with you some of these ways, no, one is if we can increase our recycling efforts, no, increase our recycling efforts. Let me expound on that. No, we Filipinos are very fond of buying, quote unquote, buying, and most of the time, even those things what we don't need, but very beautiful to the eyes, we buy, and then eventually it ended up in the stockroom of our houses, no? Kasi eventually we lost our interest, so hindi na natin siya gustong gamitin, no? So if there's a possibility to recycle all of these things, no, instead of keeping it as part of our bodega, no, so we take note of that, no? Second is that if we can address the single-use plastic issue, no, it is now a growing concern, because it is also connected to the climate crisis, because 99% of all plastics produced in this planet is coming from fossil fuel, which is the #1 contributor to greenhouse gases as well. No, so if we can address that on the plastic issue, not only on an individual basis, including also on the policy side, no, but this one is on the individual basis. Third is, of course, that one, second, plastic issue. We can do that by if we can refuse single-use plastic, and when we go out, if we can bring our eco bags when we shop, no, para at least we will be able to reduce the use of single-use plastic, or perhaps to recycle single-use plastic. No, so third, another thing that we can do is we focus on we call it fast fashion. No, you know, this country is a predominantly young country. No? There are a lot of young people here, no, and you know, very carefree. Young people. I mean, during pre-pandemic times, young people will just buy everything, clothing and so forth, left and right. No? Especially those who have the means to do that. No? If we are also very mindful about that, no, para at least because the next concern there will be, of course, waste management. No? No, so that's another thing. Of course, when you go on waste management, if you can practice you can practice the spirit of the ecological solid waste management by segregating our waste at source before it goes to, or before it is collected by local government unit. No? There are still other bold suggestions, like, for example, eating patterns is also another concern. Like, for example, eating meat products, especially beef. That has always been part of the global survey, you know, but that is not so common, not so popular in the Philippines. No, well, I would understand also the reason why. Siyempre, pag tinatayap nila sa rason na we are a low-emitting country, no, so of course, feel free to eat beef. No, but of course, just for you to understand what is the implication of beef, aside from the health issues that it would deliver on us on a personal level. Fifth, perhaps you join environmental protest. You know, we are very social media savvy. No, this country is very social media savvy, from young to old. No, they have Facebook account. Even my mother, who is 75 years old, is very active in Facebook. No, so if there is every opportunity to share in our social media accounts, very good campaign, no, for the environment or for climate change. If there is an opportunity to influence our families, our network of friends, our communities on this, no, we use that also, that platform, no, so that we can widen awareness on this issue. That is on a personal level, Jonah, no? But the personal initiatives is not the only solution to address the issue, because it requires institutional solutions, and that should be led by government. There have to be enough policies to address the issue. Not only policies, but including infrastructure, especially adaptation, no? social protection for vulnerable communities, no? Kasi ang theme ng gobyerno in addressing the climate issue in the Philippines is adaptation. Okay, adaptation simply because we already know that we are vulnerable. We already know what are the risks. So the only thing is that we cannot solve the risk head on. The thing is we have to adapt to this potential risk, no? And adapting to this potential risk requires policy, requires resources, requires cooperation between national and local government, including, of course, assistance from outside the Philippines or international partners. No? So it's really a convergence of all efforts, no, to address this issue. This cannot be done by one government agency alone. It requires concerted effort. No? Just like it cannot be done by one person alone. No? It requires the cooperation of everyone.
Yes, yes. Thank you, sir. Thank you for those very simple yet talagang effective na ways on a personal level kung paano tayo makakatulong sa environment at saka sa sama-samang pagtutulungan din sa ating bansa din po. Ayan, thank you. And again, thank you so much sa nagbibigay ng comment din po sa chat box natin, supporting this advocacy, no, for a sustainable environment natin. So last question, Engineer Ludwig. Sir, thank you for your time again. So para tayong nakapag-assess po, no, kagaya ng doktor na tinitingnan ng sintomas ng pasyente, it's saying, oh, may sakit to, may lagnat to. Our Earth talaga ay nilalagnat and it's getting warmer and we're feeling the effects of the global climate change. But the question that we really want to hear answered by CCC is that, sir, ito pa ba ay talagang malulunasan? Talagang mapipigilan ang mas malaking effect nito, sir, with the recommendations na gagawin natin o maaaring simulan ng karamihan? Posible ba talaga, sir, na malunasan ito, yung ating problema sa global climate change, or talagang abang huli na ang lahat, sir? Even a quick answer can help us makita yung importance nito, Engineer Ludwig.
Okay, scientists in the report that they made, special report on global warming of 1.5 degrees Celsius, published in 2018, this can be addressed, no? But it requires, they use the word rapid transition of all sectors, no? Especially those that contributes to greenhouse gases like transport, energy, buildings, residential. It requires rapid transition. Sabi nga nila, we have to reduce our emissions by as much as 45% by the year 2030. This is still 2021. We still have 9 years to go. No? At lahat pong ito, itong special report na to, naka-align din po to. Kasi remember, in 2015, United Nations or global leaders adopted 3 agreements. No? The first agreement was the Sendai Framework on Disaster Risk Reduction. Okay, that is the Sendai Framework. The second agreement was the Agenda 2030 on Sustainable Development Goals, which is the 17 Sustainable Development Goals outlined by the United Nations. And the last agreement, which was in December of 2015, was the Paris Agreement on Climate Change. No? So these are 3 agreements. No? We have to tackle, these 3 agreements, para sa akin, magkakambal itong lahat. No? Para sa akin, magkakambal ito lahat. You cannot tackle one agreement without touching on the other agreement. So when you tackle climate change or the Paris Agreement on climate change, you directly tackle the Sustainable Development Goal because there is a planet theme in the Sustainable Development Goal, like a climate action, life on land, di ba? Life below water, and so forth, clean energy. Nandun yan sa Agenda 2030. The Sendai Framework provides us the different framework, what are the risks and how do you prepare for those risks. No? So talagang it cuts across. No? It cuts across. So the scientific report in 2018 said that we have to reduce our emissions by the year 2030 by as much as 45%. And we have to change that graph going down so that we would be able to achieve zero emission or net zero emission by the year 2050. By the year 2050. So that is the advice. Parang isang doktor, ito yung advice, no? Di ba? So it requires now response from every government, for every country. Of course, Philippines would respond to the president, of course, with the convergence of other departments. And every country have to do their own response. So that's a different ball game, when all world leaders would come together. So pag sinabi natin, meron ba solution? Yes, there is a solution. But of course, ang next battleground there is how do world leaders view these things? Kasi ang nasa pressure sa kanila. At the end of the day, they would be the ones signing, international arrangements and cooperation and so forth to address this issue. Because no one country would be able to solve it. It requires everyone to solve it, no? To address this particular issue. That's why every year, yung UN Climate Change Conference is very important. No, yun yung palaging nangyayari around November and December. No, so this year it will be happening in November. These are always very important because all of the negotiations are there. No, at labanan niya ng mga mayayamang bansa, ng mga mahihirap na bansa. No, and kasama tayo dun sa developing countries. No, we are vulnerable, so kailangan din natin isulong yung ating interest. No, kaya siyempre wala na nga tayong kinontribute sa climate change, sa pag-init ng mundo. Tayo pa yung tumatanggap ng effect or the impacts ng climate change.
Yes.
Diba? Napakasaklap na pangitain na hindi naman tayo ang nag-cause, pero tayo ang tumatanggap. No? And then, wala pa tayong means financially to address this issue. Diba? Wala tayong ganung kalaking pera, budget to address this particular issue. No? So, ito, mga realities to that we have to understand. No? So dito, in the local level, syempre, ganun din. Di ba? Makikita natin yung mga syudad o yung mga munisipyo o yung mga rural areas, they have problems. No? Flooding, drought, and, logging and so forth. No? So these are all pockets of problems, no? Location specific. No? That also have to be addressed by the respective local government. So sa tanong, meron bang solution? Yes, there is a solution to this problem. Huwag ho tayong mawalan ng pag-asa, no? Kasi kaya pa po yan gampanan. Yun nga po, kailangan lang po ng pagsasama, no, ng lahat para masolusyonan itong problema ito.
I see. All right. Thank you so much, Engineer Ludwig, for answering that final question. And thank you, everyone, for participating in our open forum and for sharing your comments as well and your appreciation for this final part of our lifelong learning webinar. So we are done with the open forum. Just spare us some few minutes for the closing part po. So again, we would like to thank Engineer Ludwig Federigan from the Climate Change Commission for bringing us information, knowledge about global climate change, and to his team as well. But allow me to read the citation of this e-certificate for engineer. TESDA Women's Center awards this certificate of recognition to Engineer Ludwig O. Federigan in grateful recognition and commendation of your invaluable efforts and support and exemplary performance as resource person during the global climate change, what you need to know, as part of the TESDA Women's Center's lifelong learning webinar series, given this 28th day of July 2021 via Zoom meeting, signed by our Center Chief, Ms. Angelica S. Gonzalez, CPA, DPA. Congratulations. Thank you so much, Engineer Ludwig. Ma'am Angie.
Yes, thank you, Jonah. Maraming salamat po sa ating resource speaker, Engineer Ludwig. Sana po ay huwag kayong magsawa sa aming imbitasyon. Meron pang mga susunod pa kung sakali. At salamat po sa isang makabuluhan at napakamalaman na pagtalakay tungkol sa climate change. And for the active participation of our audience via Zoom and the FB Live, you are very much appreciated. To our PwC team behind the success of the webinar series, congratulations until our next lifelong learning program webinar series. Maraming salamat.
All right. Thank you so much po, Ma'am Angie Gonzalez, for that wonderful message of thanks sa team po ng Climate Change Commission. So allow me to just mention that the CCC team behind this also, we have Sir Hans Crisostomo, Ms. Mayan Mangubos, Haji De Jesus, Ms. Jeline May Martin, Ms. Shaira May Cabañas. Ito po yung nakita ko na naka-meeting natin. So from the Information and Knowledge Management Division of CCC, maraming salamat din po. So the core message of today's webinar program are these simple yet very important concepts. Let us all share information about global climate change. Huwag nating ihinto lang ngayong araw. Let us also commit to environmentally sustainable TVET and continuously hope and work towards a pollution-free planet in our own individual ways, in our own family, in our own society and community involved. That's why we would also like to request CCC for IEC, available IEC materials for the best practices of other agencies or organizations which we can benchmark. Dito rin po sa TWC, it would greatly help us so that we can contribute in greening the vet. So for more information, everyone, about global climate change, we encourage you to visit climate.gov.ph. That's the website of the Climate Change Commission. And for more information about the TESDA Women's Center, please visit our website, twc.tesda.gov.ph, twc.tesda.gov.ph. And again, it's open especially for the Juanas and the Juans for our skills training programs. And for you to rewatch the 4 parts of the webinar series of this lifelong learning program, please visit also the TESDA Women's Center YouTube channel. Okay, so with that being said, maraming salamat po, Climate Change Commission, for being our partner for this webinar program. And to all the staff of the TESDA Women's Center supporting us for this program, maraming salamat, lalo na sa mga nakakonect sa atin via Zoom and the TESDA official Facebook page. Again, we are TESDA Women's Center. This is the Center of Women Economic Empowerment and Technical Education and Skills Development. And thank you so much. See you again sa ating susunod na lifelong learning program.